Hello, everybody, and welcome to the class. Today, we're going to be talking about the art of drawing spirits into crystals. This is the conjuration class. It is designed to help people figure out how to actually call up spirits and put them to work for you. I've got a bunch of stuff I want to talk about with the great work. I want to talk about how to build your life, how to make everything go according to your plan, how we can influence things and how we can manipulate this reality the way we want it to go. But most of that involves like some real basic things like understanding what magic is and understanding what I mean when I say do a solar working, do a sun rite, do a Venus rite for this, do a Jupiter rite for that. So when I say these things, what I mean is do a conjuration of the spirits that represent those forces. And when I say that, I mean do what we're going to talk about today. So this class is essentially forming a piece of the overall what I guess I'm going to call my magnum opus of classes and materials and stuff that would actually help you be able to do the magic that I do on a regular basis. And the reason I'm teaching that is because I think it's awesome and it really makes my life a lot better in every way, shape, and form. So, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to talk about, is I talk a lot about how life is hard and magic helps, right? So life is full of crap. We have to deal with this ongoing failure of things to live up to the ideal. Our Western, I don't want to say Western, but our esoteric philosophy in the society and culture that I am a part of here in America, it grew out of ancient Greece, and one of the things that we understand about it is that life has problems, right? One of the first things Plato pointed out is that there's an ideal realm, a noetic realm where everything is perfect, and then this material realm doesn't quite measure up to that. There's no such thing as a perfect circle in the physical world. It can only be idealized, it can only be imagined, but you can't actually have anything really real for real that is perfect according to the Platonic idea of the universe, right? So it presupposes this invisible world, right? So yeah, so because life is constantly less than ideal, we've learned to appeal to this invisible world where things are perfect, where we believe that these entities reside that control the perfection of things and the manifestation of things, and we've learned to ask them for help, and that's what I consider magic to be. So let's go ahead and get started on this. So for the purposes of this class, we're going to consider magic to be the activities that we use to bring present and interact with the entities of an unseen realm using occult symbols within a ritual setting to change the natural world in accordance with our desires. This is kind of complicated because I've been arguing online about different types of definitions of what magic is for years and years and years. And I believe that it should be something that's pretty simple, like magic is talking to spirits to change your world. But my friends believe that's too simple. So I ended up with something a little bit more complicated that I wanted to walk through in a little bit more detail. So when I say what is magic, when I say life is hard, magic helps, what is magic? Magic is all of the activities that we use, right? So let's start with activities. It's all the things that we do leading up to and actually involved with conjuring these invisible spirits, right? So all of the things that we do. So the first thing I want to bring to the idea of magic is it's not something you think about, and it's not something you just read about. It's something you actually are doing something about. So it's your activities that we use to bring present and interact with the entities of an unseen realm. So bring present, right? How are we bringing them present? different cosmologies will teach you different things. Regardless of what you believe about what's going on behind the scenes, when you pull out a seal of a spirit and you call on it by its name using your words, these spirits are supposed to show up. That's what all these systems of conjuration, all these systems of prayer, all these systems of communicating with an unseen world are predicated on the idea that you speak words and you use symbols to contact these entities and bring them present. It's not only that, it's after they're present, what are you doing to interact with them? Like what happens after you've called on the spirits? I mean, this is all part of magic too. So how do you interact with them? It could be scrying, it can be asking them to bless your stuff, it can be visualization, it can be meditation and contemplation. It can be a number of different things when it comes to what you're actually doing to interact with the spirits once they're present. We do it using occult symbols within a ritual setting, right? So the occult symbols, where do we learn this stuff? This is the lore of spirits. We'll be talking a lot about that. The seals of the different spirits and where they come from and how they're generated, different ways to capture the essence of the idea of the spirit. The ritual setting itself, like what makes a magical act magical is that it's not just a regular act, right? I mean, you can sit there and make a cup of tea and go through all the same steps as preparing an herbal talisman, but you're not making an herbal talisman, you're making a cup of tea, right? So what makes it different? The difference is you're calling on invisible spirits and you're doing it in a ritual setting. You're doing it in a process that has been established to create and a supernatural effect over the natural world. And that's the last part. I guess one of the last parts of the natural world is where this magic has to take place. There's a lot of ideas that magic is a psychological thing. I just was going to teach a whole class about using magic to recover from trauma. I'm not teaching that class because I'm not a trained therapist and I don't want to get sued if somebody hurts themselves taking my advice, because I'm not a trained therapist. But the idea that magic can operate on the psychological level is, I mean, it's a scary thing, especially for people who don't know what they're doing. But yes, you can totally use magic to operate on your mental world. But that's not what I'm talking about for this class when I talk about what is magic. I'm talking about using magic to make effects happen in the material world, specifically the natural world, the world of our experiences. And I want to focus on that primarily because the experienced world, it goes back to why I brought up activities around this definition. Activities are important. This physical world is what we're trying to change. The experienced existence is why we manifest it, is why we're materializing here. What we're doing here is working out the salvation of our experiences, right? We're saving the good times that we could be having for the future by teaching ourselves to not screw things up, right? This whole thing that we're doing here in this material world is taking place for real, right? For all intents and purposes. It feels real. It experiences it senses, it feels, it exists in a material way that we interact with. And that matters, right? If it didn't matter, right? It is matter. It is matter itself. If it didn't matter, it wouldn't be happening, right? And we have to focus on how important, on how these things have to actually materialize, right? The natural world is key to where we should be focusing our magical desires, in my opinion. Desires are the last thing I want to focus on when it comes to defining magic. We don't know what we want. This is something that a number of my clients have expressed to me. We have all the infinite powers. I was a couple of years ago was one of the first times this guy hired me to do this hermetic diagnosis, and he had been through all 7 spheres, and it was the only magic he'd ever done in his life. And he had no other training and he had no other experiences. He just bought my book. He didn't believe in magic to start with, but he figured, why not? He thought it was interesting. He liked how it sounded. So he tried it. It worked for him. but he had kind of stalled out. He was making above above the poverty line, but not much more over that. And the magic that he could do had gotten him all as far as he could get. And he was happy. He was making all of his bills were paid. He had money left over each month, but he wasn't really doing anything, and he was bored. And that's why he pinged me. He's like, how do I know what to do next? And I had no idea. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, have you tried conjuring the muses? Maybe they'll inspire you to do something. Maybe they'll help you create something. The desires that drive us to materialize things. Once we have all this cosmic power, the spiritual quest that we're on to attain spiritual wisdom, insight, and magical power, and the ability to change things. Once we learn how to do all that, nobody teaches us how to figure out what we actually want. Right. So this is something that shockingly, once you have all this power, you don't really, especially if you were the kind of person that was raised by somebody who was very domineering and taught you that you should take the back seat and not be present for interfering, interrupting, or being distractive in any way as a child. If you picked up that you were just supposed to be there to help out with other people, it's going to be even harder for you to figure out what you want. And part of the 7 spheres of initiation is this path where you empower yourself and you claim your race and your value, your divine race, your natural that you've been made in God's image, right? And you go through this process and you embrace your roots and your source, and you figure out what your value is, and you're like, yes, gosh darn it, I am amazing. And now what do I want to do? And you're just like, I don't know. I'm supposed to be seen and not heard. I'm supposed to be quiet. Little pitchers have big ears. That's the kind of thing that people don't understand. And magic does not help you grow up. It does not teach you what you want to be when you grow up. People ask me all the time, is if after I get my holy guardian angel knowledge and conversation with my holy guardian angel, I'll know what my true will is. I'll know what my purpose in life is. I'm like, yeah, you know what they tell you? You ask them what you want to do. They're like, well, what do you want to do? And you're like, can I do this? And they're like, yes, you can do that. And you're like, can you help me? And they're like, yes, I can help you. And they're like, is that my true will? And they're like, well, I mean, whatever. If that's what you want to do, it is. And that's what magic teaches us, is that you get to do whatever you want. You have to know what you want. Figuring out what you want is the hard part. I don't have any answers for anybody. I'm still working on that myself, but whatever, it is what it is. BJ Swain is a good friend of mine. He's the one that actually drives my thinking on a lot of things, because he's always asking me questions about things and making me wonder if I'm right or wrong. But he and I were talking about the definition of magic, and he presented this as a definition. Magic in the context of spirit work is applying leverage, which could be in the form of a relationship, special knowledge, the manipulation of symbols or materials, or even our own power to elicit responses from the spirit world to create our desired outcomes in the natural world. And I think that is a great way to put it. My only quibble was that when you say leverage, it sounds like you might be coercing the spirits, and I don't like the idea that we're coercing them. I believe that we are very much in a symbiotic relationship where we're all different aspects of this overall thing that manifests as gods and humans and angels and a world and all this other stuff to accomplish one thing. I think that we're doing all this stuff on purpose, and the idea that we have to coerce parts of ourselves to do things is annoying to me. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying it's not valid. It's just not my approach. And because I prefer to think that people will do the right thing because it's the right thing, I don't want to hear that we have to force spirits to do anything. But that leverage he didn't mean it that way. He actually understands levers and fulcrums and physics, and he didn't watch Pirates of the Caribbean, and he doesn't have this whole idea of leverage being a way to get what you want. I mean, it is a way of getting what you want, but he doesn't think of it as manipulation. It's just the spiritual work that we do is the lever that we use to move the world. And that, I think, is beautiful. So wanted to say that. But anyway, this whole definition of magic presupposes a few very key things. First of all, it assumes that there is an invisible world that you can interact with. The ideal world that I was talking about with Plato is the invisible world, the above, where everything is perfect. And the physical world is a material world, right? So the idea that we can interact with these invisible spirits who live in an invisible world, it presupposes that there's an invisible world. It presupposes that there are entities in this invisible world, and that they are actually in control of what we experience here in the physical world, right? So like the lords of Venus, the Anael, the archangel of Venus, is somehow the intelligence of all of the Aphrodite-ness of existence that forces that focuses the forces of that planet into our experiences of love and lust and sex and generation and expansion and productivity. All those things are ruled by this archangel of Venus, right? Maybe. So there's all these entities in this invisible world that control these powers, that express it in this material world, and that they can be called on by humans, that we can call them using this lore, these symbols, their descriptions, the knowledge, the secret knowledge, that we can interact with them in some way. And that they actually have the ability to communicate with us, right? So like one of the things that we know about gravity and heat and electricity is that they don't communicate with us in words, in consciousness, in ways that we can actually understand. But what we suppose about these spirits is that they are able to communicate with us like humans. They have consciousness, they express words, thoughts, ideas, they understand beginnings and endings, they understand the approach to things that we have, and that they are willing to communicate with us and talk to us the way we talk to each other. And that they want to help us. All right. So the other thing about magic is it presupposes that not only are these entities going to show up, but they're not going to eat us, especially if you know all the magic secret words, because everybody's afraid of what you can't see, but not going to eat us. And also they're going to help us. They're not just going to sit here and listen to us and laugh at us or give us bad advice, although most magical grimoires assume the worst about the spirits and have all this stuff in place to try to get them to be less tricky. And all this stuff basically shows the corruption that people assume about the spiritual world because they've experienced the human world and they know how corrupt we are, and we're taught that we are reflections of the spiritual world, as above so below. So as corrupt as we are, we know that we can't trust these fucking spirits because we can't trust ourselves, right? So anyway, we project a lot of things onto them, and consequently we experience things to prove what we expect. And that's one of the things about the spirit world. You really do get what you bring to the table. Your expectations define your experiences, and often your outcomes and your results. So anyway, they will answer and help us. Yes. So that's what is presupposed by the idea that magic is the activities that we use to communicate with these things to get them to do what we want. How do we know that all of these things are true? Well, the cosmology is how we know these things. A cosmology is your universal map. It is all of the beliefs, all the structures, the explanations, the lore, all the information that explains why things are the way they are and what your role is in it. Okay, it explains who created this world, who exists in this world with us, and what they do, what they like, and how to talk to them, how to get in touch with them. Every grimoire has a cosmology associated with it, and you can tell like what worldview went into creating a specific grimoire. So we can tell that some grimoires were written by Protestants and others were written by obviously Catholic clergy, right? We can see that certain things are true in the way that they conjure the spirits about their beliefs about how God works and what the role of Jesus Christ was, for example. and what the roles of these different spirits are, and whether or not they were actually servants of these hierarchies of spirits, right? We can tell a lot by using our critical thinking and analyzing these things. We can see what the cosmology really was for these grimoires. Now, uh, there's there's different, right, so there's different ways of looking at it. So like there's the choirs of angels, thrones, principalities, all that stuff, right? And they correspond to the heavens that God supposedly emanated, that roughly correspond to Kabbalah, that roughly correspond to the Sephiroth, that roughly correspond to all these other things. And there's all these different angels, archangels, and entities that are associated with it. On the Klipothic side, there's devils and demons that are associated with each of these spheres, right? From this hierarchy of things, based on this Judeo-Christian concept. But if you get into the Greek perspectives on things, you end up with a completely different system where there's the nous mind, and it manifests as all these different heavens, but not necessarily the same number. Gnostics went off on one tangent where you ended up with like 365 different heavens and all these different entities in it. The different groups end up with different numbers of heavens and different types of beings in them. But when it comes to magic, there's almost always some hierarchy, some set of camps. Like if you look at the Sefer HaRatziel, it's our oldest list of spirits. It's these tribes of spirits that all do the same kinds of things, and their names and how to get in touch with them and the best times to reach them. The cosmology for that is that all these spirits hang out together in tribes. If you look at Enochian magic, right? If you look at the Book of Enoch, that is mentioned in the New Testament, it talks about the Watchers who were watching. They were watching the human beings grow, and then they saw the women and fell in love with them, and then they married them, and they had the Nephilim, and then the flood had to come to wipe everybody out, and that was the Watchers, and that was the angels that we've found out about in the Book of Enoch, one of the apocryphal books of the New Testament. Right. So this class of spirit describes one type of angel. But every angel is not going to be the same type of angel, right? So a different Dionysius the Areopagite, he had this whole view of what the angels were that explains all these choirs of the angels and the order of the eons that are ruled by one of the different archangels of one of the different heavens, and the procession of the eons that are ruled in order and sequence and all this stuff, right? So he's got these angels that are ruling over eons. Right, Michael's ruling over the eons. Amongst everything else that Michael does, the Archangel of the Sun also has time to rule an entire freaking eon on top of everything else that Michael does. So cosmologies, right? Am I right? So yeah. Anyway, every magician has a cosmology as well. Okay, so in the same way that different grimoires are going to have different approaches to things, you're going to end up building a practice that is unique to you. Your practice is going to involve spirits that you've experienced, that you've met with through your friends who've told you about them on the internet, or you've read about them in certain books and classes that you took, or books that you found on your own, or you heard about them in this system and you found them mentioned in Wikipedia, and you went to theoi.com and you found an epithet and you're starting to meditate on it. And next thing you know, you're working with the spirit, right? You're going to build your own practice. You're going to have your own entities that you work with, and they're all going to have reasons to work together because you're going to need to work with them, and you're the reason they have to work together. So eventually you have to start coming up with ways to have them make sense within your own cosmology. You're going to end up with a very unique cosmology. You're going to understand how spirits work differently than I do. I believe that there's just one big pool of consciousness, and there's energy in it, and the consciousness taps into the energy, and different types of energy are affiliated with one another, and they have an affinity for one another. and like Venus consciousness draws Venus type energy towards it. And when we start saying NAL and using its seal, we start to gather that and concentrate that energy into one place until we get enough of it to be a powerful representative of that force on the material world. And it answers to the name and the seal of NAL, right? And it does that because we expect it to, and because we're all part of this consciousness. Zeus the head, Zeus the middle, Zeus the all in all. And I believe all this stuff, right? That's how I see it. And the universe functions for me as if that were true. And that lets me do a puja and believe that Zeus the middle can manifest as Tripura Sundari, or Shiva, as much as it can Loki, or Odin, or it can as Michael the archangel, or it can as Zeus the head, Zeus the middle, Zeus the all in all. Zeus has manifested all the gods and all the archangels and all the systems and all the beliefs as a way to make sure that every part of itself can experience the experiences that it's supposed to. That's what I believe. It makes a sense of everything. It has a lot of explanatory force, and it provides a method for me to operate with basically any spirit. And that's why I use the art of drawing spirits into crystals as my universal conjuring tool. Because all of these invisible entities, no matter how your cosmology explains what they do, whether you believe they're actually spirits that are emanated to rule over every individual aspect of creation, that like the Merkava has all these, hundreds and thousands of angels, each one owning a head of a pen, right? And having to make sure that that pen is doing its thing. If you believe that those are actually how it is, that's how it's going to behave for you. And you're going to have experiences that prove it, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not wrong, and I'm not wrong. I mean, as long as our magic works, it's the truth. Okay. And that's something else I want to make sure people understand, is if your belief is crap, your life proves it, or it's garbage. All right. Your magic proves your cosmology. Okay. I wouldn't be saying all this stuff if I didn't think it was true. And I wouldn't think it was true if it didn't work for me. Right. And that's the thing, is I'm not an idiot, and you're not an idiot, and you're not going to keep doing stuff that doesn't work. Hopefully you're not going to keep like throwing good money after bad. We're not fools. Right. So don't be foolish. Don't be afraid to take stands and do what needs to be done as needed. Right. So anyway, that's whoops. I don't know if anybody saw that. Hopefully you didn't see that, but anyway, it's Zoom popped up a little thing. Yeah, so that's how we know what things are. Cosmologies teach us and inform us all these things that we presuppose about these things. So what is a cosmology? Okay, a cosmology is all your reasons that you have for believing the details around such things as the invisible worlds and these entities that exist and all these other things, right? It should be something that you already have in place. And hopefully what you already have is a rich and a robust cosmology that provides you with a firm framework to address all of these things. It explains what's going on in both of the invisible and the invisible worlds in ways that are meaningful to you. Okay, so it's not just about telling you what the names of God are that are associated with each of the spheres, so that you can work up through the 10 spheres on your Sephiroth, the Sephiroth and your Merkava chariot to ascend up to Metatron or Ratziel or whatever. It's not about, I mean, that works fine, but the cosmology is not necessarily about that as much as it's about making sure that you know what you're gonna experience as you go through the processes that lead to the goals of the system of attainment that you're on, right? So every spiritual path ought to have a destination, right? I mean, it's all about the journey. We know it's all about the journey, but there's a progress, there's a process, there's gates that you pass through on your way to attaining the promised goals and wisdom and insight that comes with the systems. The cosmology tells you what to expect next. It tells you what is going to happen. It should give you a way to predict what's going to happen in your material world. right? We should be picking up a system of divination that lets us talk to the spirits that know what's going to happen next. Not only that, we should be learning about what happens next based on what we see, right? Part of the reason that we experience things in a progression from beginning to middle to end is so that we learn that things have a beginning, a middle, and an end, so we can express and expect things to manifest that way. We can express things in a beginning, middle, and end, and we can expect things to do that. So we're not like confused by things. We're not blindsided by the ending of things, right? Like how many people have been in a relationship that ended that they didn't think would ever end because the relationship can't end. But guess what? Relationships can end, and maybe if you'd thought about that, you would have behaved differently and your relationship wouldn't have ended, right? Because we don't think about that kind of thing all the time. But if we learn that kind of thing, if our system of magic is teaching us that kind of thing, it's going to prove that what we're learning is right, and we're going to learn how to expect what comes next. As you go through these initiations into Venus, you're going to understand the cues and the subtle inflections and what is meant by different things in the romantic world, because you're friends with the forces of love, right? That manifest love in this world. So it teaches you what's going on, and it teaches you what to expect. It provides you with an explanatory force for the things that are going on around you. So not only does it show where you're at in relationship to things, but it tells you what happened before and what's going to happen next. So I want to go over the different types of entities that you're going to find in each of these, like at least in the practices that I perform when I do conjuration. These are all the different types of entities that I work with that you can work with too using this conjuration system. Your cosmology is going to inform you of the different types of entities, but these are sort of at a very broad scope, the types of spirits that I work with on a regular basis. And I hope that they give you a pretty wide sampling that you can pick from to do your workings going forward. And also I want to talk about like sort of how they manifest and what to expect when you're working with them. But first of all, I want to talk about gods. Like the gods are like the highest level, in my opinion, of these entities. They are the purest form and the most powerful form of the qualities that they represent. So like Zeus is the god of lightning. He's the god of thunder. He's the king of the gods. He's the god of Jupiter, right? The planet. He's the god of the forces of expansion, blessing, the greater benefic. He's got all the mythology of the rapacious, boisterous, driving force, this urge of creation that is the start of every myth. Like how many myths start with one day Zeus was horny, right? What does that represent? Was God wanted to start some shit. He wanted to get some things going. That's what Zeus is. He's that creative impulse, that drive to that urge to manifest things, and he's carrying on a long line of that. Kronos had the power to create, and he was eating the babies when they came out. Uranus had the power to create, and he was suffocating the babies, not letting them emerge. Zeus had the power to create, and he was popping them out left and right. So who is the better god, right? Who's the better keeper of that creative force? In my opinion, it's Zeus, because we all get to experience things, but that's just I like Zeus. So anyway, the gods, they represent the purest forces of these highest levels, right? So in my cosmology, there's like a demiurge that's the source of everything. He's Zeus the head, right? Zeus the middle represents the next level of manifestation, which is all the gods, all the spirits, all the archangels, all the deities, all those entities, right? But the highest level of those entities then would be the gods. So like the gods of the planets represent the 7 planetary forces of creation. So Zeus in his form of Jupiter is going to represent the purest form of Jupiter. But the gods don't have bosses, right? So some of the gods obey other gods, but none of the gods are subject to anything other than, like, some people say Zeus is subject to the fates. But when you get into the Orphic tradition, which I am an adherent of, my interpretation of this whole Zeus, the head, middle, and all in all, That's all Orphic. But this whole Orphic interpretation says that ultimately Zeus is the source of everything and trumps everything. But within the middle part of Zeus, where the gods are manifesting, there's different hierarchies, and gods are at the highest, and they don't have bosses for the most part. They aren't you don't call, like, you can call on the name of a god to force a demon or an angel to obey you, but there's no name of god you can call on to make another god obey, unless it's like Zeus, the king of the gods. And even he gets disobeyed in the myths often enough to know that that's not how it really works. So yeah, you've got there are some rules that say Zeus has to obey the fates, right? Even Zeus is subject to the fates, and he's afraid of night, Nyx. So people think that he's weaker than night. And he came much later, so you would think he might be weaker or whatever. But uh, the let's see. Oh, I lost what I was trying to say with that. But anyway, they are without the need to actually be coerced to manifest, to get them to do what you want. Anyway, they represent the intelligence and active parts of the forces, the qualities that are being represented. They are more personality. They have less patience than some of the more tutelary spirits. If you work with Tzadkiel, the archangel of Jupiter, he's going to be more about teaching you to manage your finances and your wealth. The forces of Zeus are going to be expansive, and he's going to shoot you with a lightning bolt, right? Full of that, have some power. More personality, less patience. Treat them like royalty. Basically assume that they are the royalty of the spirit world. Next, we have angels and demons. So angels and demons are the messengers. Like if you look at the name angel, angeloi, and demon, daimonis, in Greek, they go back to the words that literally mean the messengers of the gods. They are one level lower than the deities. They represent the spirits that carry the forces that they represent. So like if you look at Aphrodite, one of her servant spirits is Cupid. Cupid shoots the arrows of love. Aphrodite is the goddess of love. In that situation, Cupid is the angel of Venus, right? Because he's delivering the message of love through his arrows. He's a god on his own, but he is a smaller god. He's a daimonis. He's a daimon. He's the servant of the god. In the New Testament, when one of the authors says, we know that all the gods of the pagans are daemons, he's talking about the fact that they are all servants of the higher god, which should be Zeus, but they thought it was Jehovah or whatever. But I mean, in a way they were right, but whatever. The messenger spirits are the ones that carry the forces that they represent. If you look at the choirs and legions of spirits, if you look at in the choir in the angelic realms, Dionysius the Areopagite lists off the 9 heavens of angels and the 9 choirs of angels, and each choir has a certain number of spirits associated with it. And when you look at the Lemegeton and the Goetia, it talks about how many legions each of the demons has at their beck and call that will obey them and will work to materialize these things. So again, there are the messenger spirits that work to carry the forces that they represent. They are also the familiar spirits. They're the ones that in Abermelin, you get these 4 elemental spirits that will go up the food chain for you all the way up to the kings of hell if you need them to. But they're the ones that actually hang out with the magician. They're much lower on the food chain. So think of these gods are the ones that are overlooking civilization and all the world and everything. And then the angels and demons are the ones that are their servants and manifest the aspects of the spheres that they are related to. The elemental kings are next on the list. They represent the material world. Let me see if I can. pause this just a moment. Yeah. So the elemental kings, if you look at the chain of manifestation and in the Hermetic creation myth, basically when the unmanifest idea, when something that you want to create, when you imagine what it is, it has to pass through all these spheres of materialization for it to manifest. And that's the seven spheres that I have a whole book about. And it passes down through Saturn and then Jupiter and then Mars and then the sun and then Venus and then Mercury and then the moon. And then it gets passed over to the elemental kings. So there's the celestial realm, the invisible realm, and then there's the material world, the manifest world. And the material world is ruled over by these elemental kings. It's made up of earth, air, fire, and water. And each of these elemental kings has legions of terrestrial spirits that belong to them and obey them. And they are the Undine Sylphs, the aerial spirits, and the gnomes. Yeah, Undine Sylphs, gnomes, salamanders. All right. So those are the four elemental kingdoms that are like the choirs of the angels. That they are just like the spirits above world. They in the Corpus Hermeticum, it talks about how the Spiritus Mundi saw all the governors of the seven spheres and made reflections of them in the material world. In the Picatrix, there's a mirror that you can create that has the seven winds on it. The seven winds of those mirrors are the reflective, the material lords that reflect the seven planetary powers in the spiritual world. When you look at Agrippa's tables of the planets, he's got an intelligence and a spirit, the celestial version of a planetary power and the material version of a planetary power. Both of them are invisible, both of them are spirits, but one is closer to this material world. The material world is under these four elemental kings. And they are Edgin, Amaimon, Paimon, and Oriens, according to Agrippa's scale of the number 4. So they're basically the ones that oversee the manifestation of an idea after it's passed through the seven spheres before it manifests here in the material world. There are also tutelary spirits. The tutelary spirits are personal assigned entities. These are the holy guardian angels, the supernatural assistant that you get through the Greek magical papyri. This can be your spirit guides if you're into the New Age. It can be your Agoiades, your self-made perfect. It can be any aspect of consciousness that guides you personally, spiritually. All right. And there's different interpretations for this entity, but almost every spiritual tradition involves having something like a spirit that you either get when you are first initiated into the cult and given your witch powers, you get a familiar spirit, or when you finish Abramelin, you get 4 familiar spirits, plus you have your holy guardian angel. Or you have with Skirlin and the Grimorium Verum, you have this entity that has your blood on its name, and it goes and gets you spirits when it's time to call on them. You can have the supernatural assistant from the Greek magical papyri who brings out the different foods for the gods so that they have the right offerings. The Greek magical papyri teach that when you receive that god, you become a god, so that at that point, when you die, you can be worshipped as a god, and you can respond to your worshipers as if they were, as if you were a god. So you can like bless the living and help them from beyond the grave. This entity continued on to like the Abramelin rite, the Holy Guardian Angel of Abramelin rite. You find it in Samek. Crowley embraced it whole hog. The most of what we know about the Holy Guardian Angel comes from Samek's Crowley's Liber Samek and his interpretation of this tutelary spirit. it's a great spirit, but this method of conjure will work with that spirit as well. The name of this entity can be derived from your natal chart using a method in the three books of occult philosophy from Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically, these spirits are all the different types of spirits that we can work with. Nature spirits and ghosts. Nature spirits are the genius loci. These are the like when I conjured the four kings and I asked for initiation into the elemental realms, one of the first things I saw was all the bugs, all the insects of the air, all the bugs sort of came down and started flying through the sunbeams in the forest, right? Birds fell, that didn't fall, but they like flew up and landed on branches next to me and chirped, right? And little bunnies and chipmunks started running through the forest, and like I noticed there over in the stream, there's like fishes and turtles, right? So like all of a sudden I was aware when I asked for initiation into the elemental realms, that the elemental realms, the spirits of the elemental realms are the animals, right? So the animals of the material world are the ways that the invisible world manifests. It's not just that. There's also satyrs, nymphs, and the fair folk, the elves, the fairies. The elemental spirits, right? The gnomes and the salamanders and the undines. You can work with these spirits. You can find ways to appease them. You can work with them to put out fires. You can work with them to bring rains, right? You can work with them directly to heal people, right? These are all things that these entities are great at. It's not just those guys, but also any of the spirits of the material world that are closer to the material world. The ghosts of your local dead, right? The human being, according to the some of the Kabbalistic traditions, the human soul consists of 4 or 5 parts, right? There's an eternal part that is going to be eternal forever, and it goes from one lifetime to the next. It incarnates, it puts on a personality, it puts on a sense of self, that whole thing. That's a separate soul. It goes on to have all the emotions and feelings that it has throughout its life. That's a separate soul. And then it also has its physical body that it incarnates, and that's a separate soul. So there's these 4 different parts of the soul, according to Kabbalism. There's a 5th part that other people hypothesize exists. It could be the neshama. Some people say that is the holy guardian angel. I don't have an opinion on that, but anyway, the different parts of the soul, some of them are mortal, right? Some of them, like your body dies, that part of the soul is dead at death. Your emotions continue to live for up to 6 weeks after your body dies, according to this tradition. So when you cover up the mirrors after somebody dies in the Jewish tradition, it's because the mirrors, you can see the shades of the dead. You can see this nephesh part of the body, the soul, the emotional part, the animal soul. You can see it in the mirrors, and it feeds off of your fear, because basically this is a part of yourself that exists and exists. It consumes your emotions, your fear, your anger, your frustration, your love, your sex, everything like that. It lives off of that while you're alive. When you're dead, it can eat other people's. It can eat the emotions of other people. So when you have a spirit haunting a place and it causes fear and anxiety, what it's trying to do is get a free meal, right? According to me and my interpretation of how things work, it explains why that happens, right? So getting rid of those spirits is about cutting them off, starving them to death, or using the solar energies to blow them out, make them move on, whatever. They are mortal. They should die with the flesh. Basically, if they're still around later, it's usually gross. But these are the things that people can use. The souls of the restless dead that can be trapped and used to for love spells. You've probably heard of a terrible curse. You can make someone love you by binding a restless spirit to them to make them think about you and forever and ever, right? Or you can use a restless spirit to obsess your enemies and make them think about paying you back what they owe you, or you can do all these wonderful things with these obsessive spirits. And Hecate is a goddess of these obsessive spirits. Hermes Chthonios is a god of these spirits. You can conjure these gods or goddesses using a conjuration rite like this, and then ask them to bring you some of these restless dead spirits, right? But again, you can also work with them directly if you wanted to using this conjuration rite. It's better though to work with another spirit. I wouldn't work with the dead directly on my own, because it's creepy. And what I mean by creepy is they can creep onto you and start feeding off of you and all this stuff. And I don't know how to do all that stuff and handle it right, but the gods do. So I just work with Hecate, or Bune is a good spirit that has necromantic powers and authority with the dead. But mostly Hermes Chthonios he's the black man at the crossroads. Andromalius is a good spirit to work with for this kind of thing. I don't work with the dead personally directly. I always go through an intermediate. So I would recommend that too. But again, that's just another type of spirit that we work with. You have a spirit. You have an eternal spirit within you, right? So the other parts of the human soul, according to Kabbalah, are the eternal part and the sense of self, right? The sense of self gets stored in the Akashic record. That's your reincarnated self. That's when you remember your past lives, you're basically remembering all the different selves that you've ever worn, that you've grown in the families that you were born to and all that stuff. But your eternal self is the one that goes on and experiences everything. And that's the part that Crowley wrote, Frater per durabo is but an eye, and what eye none knoweth. Skip witches, hop toads, for the play of the universe is the pleasure of Frater per durabo, for he is but an eye. Anyway, so like it's that part of you that is just observing and experiencing life and goes on and materializes again and again. Yeah. So cosmologies they provide all this information about who these different spirits are, the different realms that they inhabit, and what their powers are and what they're like. I just gave you the rundown of all the different entities that I work with and what I think they are like, and my experiences with them. And these are all the different kinds of spirits that you can draw into crystals using this conjure technique that we're going to be talking about. So anyway, back to cosmologies. Cosmologies are also the sources of spirit lore, and spirit lore is what we need to be able to actually conjure these spirits. It's where we get the information that that lets us go after what we want. So say I want to conjure a Venus spirit. I'm going to ask for sex. This is if I were single, by the way. I'm happily married. I would never need to do this. But say a single guy wanted to ask for sex and meet 3 attractive potential sex partners over the next 2 weeks. What we can do is we can predict a method of obtaining this outcome using our knowledge of love and sex and the entities that are related to that we learn from the cosmologies that inform us of these forces and the symbols and seals and names of the entities that control how these forces manifest in our material world. So stories of Venus explain what she's like and what she influences, and tell us what her roles are and her names. So we can call up Venus and Aphrodite, Uranus, and Aphrodite's different epithets to get her to help us out and work with us directly. So if we're working with the god Aphrodite, we can call on her by her various names. We can also learn the things that she influences and the herbs that she likes. You know, what were her statues made out of? What were the things that she was offered in her temples? We can put those things together and say, Aphrodite, we call upon you by this name, and we bring you these herbs and these flowers that you received at your temple, and blah blah blah. Come forth. And as we're doing this, we're going to be like drawing more and more of her attention and more of her awareness and more of her energy, quote unquote. The powers that she represents will continue to be focused in our area, right? So yeah, so You learn about the herbs that are the parts of the vibe that are the plants. You learn about the animals and the scents and the affiliation with the planetary classification system. It tells us more about that vibe, that energy that we're drawing to us, so that we can gather more of it in one place. Basically, what a ritual is we take something symbolic and we do something symbolic to that symbol, right? So a symbol of Venus, we take it and then we do something symbolic to it. So, like, say I have a statue of Venus, I light a tea light candle and a stick of incense, and I say a prayer to her, expressing what I want her to do for me. That's a symbol, her smell, and an offering. The lore that says that she would eat fire, right? So, I mean, it's pretty simple and straightforward. That's one way to look at it. Another way to see how lore informs our power as magicians. The power of the cosmology is looking at this Astrapsukos spell. It's included in one of the appendices in the workbook in full. I've got an excerpt of the actual spell here, and what you're doing is you're calling on Hermes, and the image here is of a rabbit, because to me Hermes always, every time I do any hermetic magic with Hermes Chthonius specifically, like, I always see a bunch of rabbits, so I've learned to associate Hermes with bunnies. So anyway, suppose I'm trying to call Hermes and I want to call on him. If you look at this spell in the PGM, the reason that the god responds is because of all the secret knowledge that you have about him. So it starts with, hear thy names in heaven, Lanthin Uthi, Usthin Uthi, Almanuth, Enthomukh. I can't say any of these things. I'm not Greek. I don't know how to say any of this stuff. I'm pretty sure it was a dead language and we've sort of reconstructed it, but I don't think it really matters. In my opinion, the spirits respond to me as badly as I speak it, so I'm not gonna worry about it too much. So anyway, it goes on and it says, these are the names in the quarters of the heavens. Yes, I know thee, and I know that what are thy shapes. In the east, thou hast the figure of an ibis. In the west, thou hast the figure of a dog baboon. And it goes on and on. I know that thy plant, the grape, that is an olive. I know that your wood is ebony. I know you, Hermes, and I know that where you're from, your town is Hermiopolis, right? So as you're calling on this god, as you're doing this spell in the Greek magical papyri, you're telling the god why it should show up, and it's because you have all the secret knowledge, all the secret lore about the god. This is how you get it to show up. This is why when we go on to the Trithemian art of conjuring spirits, we have an ebony wand that shows up. And why is it ebony? Because it's a hermetic rite. Hermes is the god of magic. We're calling on the power of Hermes. We're calling on the power of Hermes to draw in these entities, in his role of angelos, the messenger of the gods. Go forth and bring forth the gods, Hermes. Because I know that your wood is ebony, right? We're symbolically saying all that just by having an ebony wand in this right now, right? Because we're using our occult knowledge, our secret lore, to call on these spirits, right? So that we know how to coalesce the energies that we're calling on because of our cosmology. Our beliefs inform our practice. Our practices reflect our beliefs. Our beliefs tell us what the true nature of things are, and they shape what we do, right? It also tells us what our rights are. Like, where does our right to conjure come from? The lore that we learn about occult powers and beliefs and everything teaches us what our rights are as magicians and why the spirits would even bother to speak to us. One of the things that people like to do lately is talk about closed practices. You can't learn this. The gods won't answer you unless you know all the secrets, and we're not going to teach you. And you can't really be a magician of this type because you don't have the secret powers. You weren't initiated, and that's all fair. I don't think that people should be ripping off other cultures and pretending like they have been initiated and charging all this money for it, for stuff that isn't theirs. I don't think that's cool. I get it, but the idea that you can't do magic because somebody it's just relatively recent that people have really given that big of a crap about it. Traditionally, there's always been a path of conversion. There's always been a path of learning, a respectful way to adopt other people's practices and use it to inform and incorporate aspects of it into your own practice as a magician. We've always been eclectic appropriators of one another's cultures. We share our techniques because we're trying to get ahead. For the most part, sometimes we don't. Whatever, you do what you want. That's what we do. But anyway, you're right to conjure a spirit. The reason that it's going to respond to you is part of what you learn from these different traditions. If you've been initiated into a certain tradition, you have access to the spirits. In the Grimorium Verum, if you've created the seal of Skirlin at the right time, and if you have all the tools that you're supposed to, then you can call on Lucifer and Beelzebub and Ashtaroth to make a pact with you, to bring up other spirits to work with you, to bring up other spirits to work with you, to bring up whatever, right? So you can do that because you know how to build that seal and how to get Skirlin to work for you in the first place. Your secret knowledge has informed your practice. Another way of doing things is like so BJ Swain is coming out with a new class or a new book on witch blood, right? And he talks about how Helios is the father of witches and Hecate is the mother of witches, and the children of Helios and Hecate are the witches, right? And basically, if you're a witch, you have quote unquote witch blood, and you are of the blood of Helios and Hecate. So in that situation, the power to be a witch comes from your blood that was your relationship back to Hecate and Helios. Another way to have power over spirits traditionally in the Hebrew culture was you were special because God chose you. You were chosen. And because you were the chosen people, you got the special benefit of questionable benefit of having God's attention focused on you for years and years. Yay. So you got special blessings because you're the chosen people. Another reason that some people are special is because they've been reincarnated. They're the bodhisattvas who have reincarnated so many times that they have spiritual wisdom, and they're going to teach you all these wonderful things and all these things, or they're spiritually enlightened souls that you can pray to after they die, and they can help you out. It explain these cosmologies of reincarnation explain why a person should be listened to, and how to become a person of power when you go. The shaman's wound explains that you have been marked by the spiritual world and have some kind of crippling thing that sets you apart and marks you as belonging to the spirits. It can also come from your initiatory path. Like I teach the seven spheres, conjure the seven archangels and read the seven planetary Orphic hymns, and then sit and meditate, and then wonder of wonders, you receive the powers of that sphere and you become a better person, and you can do all these wonderful things, right? It's an initiatory path, and then after that you'll better understand how to create your world. So that's what I teach you can do, is the right of why you get to create the world is explained by your cosmology. So as we've gone through this, I've been talking about my cosmology, but I'm gonna give you the full breakdown of everything I believe and why I believe it. And the reason I'm telling you is so that you understand later on, when I get to the actual conjuration script, why my conjuration script looks the way it does. You don't have to use my conjuration script. One of the things I'm going to make sure that you have as part of this is the original conjuration script that came from The Art of Drawing Spirits into Crystals, written allegedly by Johann Parthenius. It works fine. You don't have to use my script. My script reflects my beliefs. My script reflects my approach. Your script needs to reflect your approach and what you believe. If you don't know what you believe yet about why you're here and why you have power and why you're a wonderful magician and why you should be doing this, then I suggest that you go through the rest of my classes and take the 7 spheres initiations and do an elemental initiation and get to know your holy guardian angel or conjure a supernatural assistant. And then you're going to have a reason to feel confident in your power. But it's the confidence that gives you your power, in my opinion. And I'll explain that here in just a moment. All right. So my cosmology, let me pull it up over here on my notes on this other page, because I am Ancient of Days and barely see. All right, so my cosmology. Everything we know about from the Hesiod mostly happened, and Zeus took over as king, and we have the heroic age, like it says. So if you look at the Hesiod, there is a whole creation myth that explains that in the beginning was chaos, or basically there was like this primordial, everything was mixed together, and then out of that came chaos, and then came Gaia, and then came Eros and necessity and night, right? I think night came before everybody else. And then Gaia came, and then after Gaia came, there was Eros, and as soon as Eros came, there was desire, right? She experienced desire for the first time. And she manifested Aranos, right? So Aranos was actually materialized by Gaia as a consort so that she could have sex. So this was like the first copulation came in response to desire, in response to necessity, Ouroboros, or however you say it, Cerberus, and Eros, right? So desire and necessity came together, and Gaia manifested Uranus, and they copulated, and the babies of Gaia and Uranus came into being, right? And they were the Titans. But Uranus wouldn't stop copulating. He stayed on top of her and would not get off of her and allow her to give birth. So she just kept getting pregnant. And gods, according to the Greeks, the insides of the gods are not like the insides of people. That Gaia had inside of her all of the gods, and later on, Kronos is swallowing his children. So, and they were fine. They were puked back up and they lived. So being inside a god is not quite the same. But anyway, they weren't able to materialize. And because they weren't able to materialize, Gaia was caused a great deal of pain and suffering. And she was having earthquakes and volcanoes, and it was awful. So, and basically the urge to create was thwarted, right? So you got to remember that this is the essence of our universe, is the expression of creation. At least my understanding of it. Every aspect of our existence is about this urge to create and manifest things, and what happened as a result of whether or not it was allowed to create. Okay, so Uranus and Gaia are trying to create things. Gaia created Uranus so that we could have an existence, and he wouldn't let it stop because he couldn't stop the fucking process, right? And just the process of intercourse was so much perfect for him that he wouldn't stop doing that and let it come into being. So lust for results or whatever, he wouldn't let go of it enough for it to manifest. So she conspired with her Titan son inside of her, gave him a flint knife, and had him cut off the phallus, because that's what Uranus was so into. She was like, fine, screw you, you don't get the penis anymore. So she cut off his penis. Uranus freaked out, leapt back, and was like, what the hell? And he hasn't touched her since, right? But he doesn't have a penis, so why would he want to? So he's not interested in that anymore. He cannot create with her, and that was his whole purpose for being, was to create things. So the sky is up there, and it's not actually touching the earth anymore. His phallus, interestingly enough, Aphrodite comes up out of the foam that was there. She is not begotten by Zeus. She is actually created by Uranus. So she is technically a Titan as well, if you think about it. But Aphrodite comes into being, and the phallus goes on to become the sun, right? It's circulating, it's high up in the earth, in the air. It's referred to in the Hesiod as floating there somewhere, but it is the sun. And if you look at the Egyptian mythology, Osiris's phallus was cut off and they couldn't replace it. And it was replaced with a golden phallus. Again, Osiris's phallus is the sun. On is the sun in Thelema. It is always represented by a circle with a dot in it. That is the penis when you're looking directly at it. The sun is the penis of God, in case you were ever wondering about that. So anyway, after Aranos skips out, the Titans are able to manifest. Rhea takes over as the goddess of the earth. She and Kronos are getting it on, but Kronos is not letting his babies manifest either. But he rules the Golden Age, and the Golden Age was perfect and everybody was happy. That's worth noting. But he still wasn't letting the created things manifest, right? So he was still holding on to the things that were being created. He wasn't letting it actually materialize. So he was swallowing his babies. They were coming inside of himself. And Rhea got upset and she conspired with Gaia, and they had a stone that they dressed up as baby Zeus, and they hid Zeus in the cave of Didymus, right? And all this stuff happened because the creative force was being constrained. It wasn't being allowed to materialize. And also, some of Gaia's children were allowed to manifest and others weren't. The Cyclopes were hidden because they were ugly. The Hecatonchires, the 100-handed entities that had hundreds of hands, were ugly. So Kronos didn't let them out, and that's what pissed off Gaia too. That's why she worked with Rhea, was because her children were too ugly to manifest. So the idea that you couldn't manifest, or that there were some things that were too ugly to manifest, or that you couldn't progress and create new things, that stagnation was the sin that created the necessity for change that resulted in Zeus being raised as this rebel, right? And he's raised as this rebel to overthrow his father, to commit regicide, right? To take over the kingdom and destroy this whole regime of the Titans, right? So anyway, it's important to remember that this whole process, like as Zeus is being raised in this cave, he's being taught the essence of magic. His first wife was Metis. Metis was the goddess of cunning and intellect and intelligence and quick-wittedness, right? But she was also the goddess of pharmacology and magic, and specifically the sorcerous arts that are related to herbs and healing and poisons and tripping and hallucinations and things like that. Things that reveal the nature of existence in ways that people aren't interested in understanding normally, because it's going to kill you, or you have to be sick to experience the healing properties of plants, or you're hallucinating and you're experiencing things as if it were things like a symbolic death. That's not exactly pleasant necessarily, but is definitely insightful. So anyway, you go through all these processes. And anyway, so there's all these aspects of creation getting thwarted in this creation story. Zeus is raised as this rebel to overthrow his father. The Titans aren't interested in doing that. So Zeus is learning all this stuff about magic and Metis. Oh, and so Metis is all this stuff about magic and pharmacology and all this stuff, but it's also a word that means an attitude of confidence. And it's the confidence that we feel as magicians when we know that what we speak is going to happen. If you knew that everything that you said was going to happen, you would have so much confidence. You'd be telling the world what to do and it would follow through on it, and you'd have the ultimate confidence. 95% of our life, like the thing about Hermetic, like the manifestation stuff, the secret, the materialization secrets of Hermetics, the thing about it that is true is that you can actually materialize your your life by having a positive attitude. A positive attitude creates more opportunities for success for you than a negative attitude does. Attitude goes a long way. It's not 100% useful, and the idea that you can use it all the time is to succeed is false, but the grifters succeed on confidence without magic. As magicians, we have the confidence that comes from knowing gnosis, that we have that secret lore. Our cosmology has informed us and empowered us. We've been through our initiations. We know that we have the power of creation, and we have the confidence to accomplish those things. So for us, that metis comes from that knowledge. But for Zeus, it came from training. He had to learn how to do it, and he ended up marrying Metis in the first place. And then she was going to have a baby that was going to take his place, so he swallowed her, and then she became Athena and wisdom and all that stuff. So wisdom comes from when you actually integrate your cunning magic, your cunning understanding of your witty understanding of the ingredients that you manipulate to create things. That's your magic. Once you incorporate magic into who you are, you have wisdom. Wisdom just manifests, consequently fully formed, springs from your brow. So anyway, that's an interesting thing about Metis. So anyway, all this stuff takes place in Hesiod's creation myth, right? And you go through it, and Zeus overthrows his dad. He has a Titanomachy. He goes down to hell, right? One of the reasons he rewards Hecate is because she helps him during the Titanomachy. She helps him defeat Cronus. And how does she do that? Well, what do we know about Hecate? She is the key holder, right? She's got the keys to hell, right? So where were the Hecatomachires? Where were the 100-handed gods that helped Zeus overthrow his brothers? They were in hell. Where were the Cyclopes? They were in hell. They were in Hades. They were kept there by Cronus because they were ugly, right? And that's what pissed Gaia off. Who has the keys to that? Hecate, a Titan, right? Who got rewarded after the Titanomachy was over? Hecate. She received a portion of heaven and the seas and the earth from Zeus. Everything that Zeus and Poseidon and Hades ruled over, a portion of it was given to Hecate for and reward for standing by Zeus and the Olympians against Cronus. And how did she do that? The key holder, the key bearer, the torch bearer, Cleiaduce, she went down to the crossroads and she opened up the gateway, and she let out the monsters, and she let out the gorgons, and she let out the monstrosities that people didn't want to see, the things that people want to hide from existence. She brought them to light, and she focused them on destroying the patriarchy, as it were, the whole structure that was keeping us from manifesting and materializing the creation as it should be. So anyway, so the Hesiod talks about all that stuff, right? After a time, Zeus wins. Zeus goes on, and he's the king of the heavens. He has Hercules, in the Orphic tradition. He goes on and he swallows Phanes and has Dionysus and all this stuff. And we'll talk about the Orphic history in a different perspective in a second, but I want to mention that at least. But in the heroic age, you've got Zeus and Hera and all the stories of all the gods that are taking place while Zeus is the king of the gods. And that takes place after the Titanomachy, after the destruction of Cronus, and they're all buried under dirt. The 100-handed enemies of the Titans basically buried the enemies of Zeus. And when it comes time for you to bury your enemies, you should definitely go to hell, get some help, and use the forces of the underworld to bury your enemies in the same way. Just let them be completely overwhelmed by the forces of hell is a good approach. It's what Zeus did, and I highly recommend it. So anyway, back to the mythos. So after he's been king for a while, he starts to feel troubled. He knows that he's going to have somebody's going to take his place. He swallows Metis. The whole Athena thing happens. But there's this myth in the Orphic tradition that he one day, and this is all from the Derveni manuscript. So everything from here on out is right out of the Derveni manuscript. Up until this point, we've been talking about Hesiod stuff. End of Hesiod. This was like 500 B or 800 BC, and now we're moving into like 500 BC. This is the Orphic Mysteries. 4 or 500 BC was when the Orphic Mysteries were written about, and this particular manuscript, the Derveni manuscript, was recorded. And we talk about what happens next. And this is where everything I'm about to speak to comes from, is this Derveni thing. So one day, Zeus starts to have this premonition that things are going to go bad, and he starts to feel uncomfortable. He goes and he seeks out Night, and he goes to the cave where Night lives, and he's afraid to go in. And this is where we learn that Zeus is afraid of Night. And she's the ancientest of the gods. And if you look at the original, the source of creation, it should have gone to her first, because she is the oldest of the gods after chaos. She should have been the one to create things, but she passed it on to Gaia. Gaia got it from with Uranus, and that whole thing happened there. But Night was the original person who should have been the keeper of creation. She was content just to hold the starry skies, right? So darkness, Night, is in her cave, and Zeus approaches her and asks her for advice because he's troubled, and she gives him an oracle. And the oracle that he receives shows him that he basically has to find the phallus that I was talking about earlier of Uranus, the creative principle, the generative force that is hanging in the sky. He has to consume it. He has to internalize it and make it a part of himself and his godly interior. It has to be internalized. And when he does this, the universe itself is going to collapse on itself. And he does this, he goes up, he finds it, he consumes it, and the universe collapses on itself, and he recreates it in his own image. And the Derveni manuscript says, it cuts off shortly after that. He goes on and he begins to create the world around him. But it talks about how after he's created this world in his own image, the first thing he does, he becomes the source of all. Zeus the head is the source of all. There's this poem that goes, Zeus the head, Zeus the middle, Zeus the all in all. And it's a reference to Zeus being the source of everything. He becomes the head. And Zeus the middle, he basically he imagines all the gods. He rewrites history, and he rewrites it according to what we see in Hesiod, right? Because Hesiod is basically the history that Zeus rewrote after he created the universe in his own image. And he included the gods, so Chaos, Night, Gaia, Uranus, Kronos, himself, Rhea, his wives, the whole the Titanomachy. He recreated all that stuff. Why did he do that? Because it was important to him to have similarities. What did he leave out? We don't know. We don't know what didn't happen in this story, but what he did keep in it are essentially the reflections of what we need to know about our existence, right? So there's the theme of creation must be expressed, the theme of overcoming those who would stop your creation, right? That's the essence of our story so far, is that we want to create and express things, and anything that stops us will be overcome. Zeus consumes this phallus, this source of existence, this creative force, this principle of creation, and he expresses it again as all the gods. Zeus the middle is the deities, the angels, the demons, the assistants, the messengers. The middle parts, that's Zeus himself, the god Zeus that we talk about, that has a temple, and he holds Nike, and he's got a staff in his hand, and all that. That's different Zeus. It's not Zeus the head. Zeus, the Olympian king, is Zeus Jupiter god, right? Jason Miller has a course on Jupiter magic. Excellent course. I recommend it to everybody. It has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. All right. Totally different Zeus, different cosmology, different aspects, different lore, different results when you conjure him, different aspects of Zeus, different aspects of Jupiter, but similar, right? So anyway, So Zeus imagines all these different gods, and that's the middle. He imagines the forests and the lovely forests and the trees, they grow from his shoulders, the streams, the birds, the animals, all these things. And there's this whole poem where he talks about it. But it's basically like this lightning bolt that you see in this presentation slide here. It's the source of the lightning bolt is one point, and then it branches off into multiple branches, and then it branches off again into the scintillating fractal points of the fractals. And that's the all in all. And that's where Zeus manifests as all of existence, and he is the material world. And we catch glimpses of this Zeus the head, Zeus the middle, Zeus the all in all, this Orphic mystery. It's still alive in the 3rd century when we're reading this Christian stuff where it talks about like Paul, I guess it's in the 1st century. Paul was writing about how there was a statue in Athens when Paul was writing the Acts, when he was going through the Acts of the Apostles, and the statue was to an unknown God, right? He also talks about, he uses the phrase, in whom we live and breathe and have our being, talking about God. And he's like, I'm going to tell you who this unknown God is, and this unknown God is actually Jesus, right? Blah, 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 but a bunch of bullshit. But the Orphic tradition taught that we have our being within God, and God is all in all. So if you look at it practically, I am a manifestation of Zeus. I'm the manifestation of Zeus that manifested as Josh. I am this sea of energy and consciousness and elementally put together planetary ideals that are, thank you, that are quite great. But they all manifest together as one Josh, right? And I am the combination of the 7 spheres and the 4 elements. In the same way, the Tzadkiel is another spirit that manifests in a different way without a body necessarily to materialize different aspects of existence. That Tzadkiel is also Zeus, an aspect of Zeus the middle, the unmanifest middle. This cup in my hand, this is elemental. It is of the material world, but it's also Zeus. The material world is Zeus, the all in all. It is the ultimate points of that lightning bolt. And when you go through Agrippa, there's a part where it talks about knowing yourself, and when you know yourself, you'll know all things, and you'll know God, and you'll know all the pieces and parts and how everything works together, and how the mystery of the one thing is created in a multitude of complexities. And I'm not quoting directly at all, but basically the fractal edges of a lightning bolt are all the different aspects of existence that we can experience. It is the world that we experience, that comes into our soul and our minds and our brain through our senses, through our skin, through our eyes, our ears, our nose. All of our senses give us these experiences. It's processed in our brain. This electricity, this bolt of lightning that is in our lives, that is created in ourselves, in our cells, in the mitochondria of our cells. This electric force was passed on to us by our parents, when their cells came together and formed what we became. That electric spark was passed on to us that was inside of them. That spark of light, that lightning bolt, continues to flow through us and will continue to pass on to everything that we engender and that we create in the world. It will never cease. It's part of one ongoing expression of this lightning bolt. It doesn't stop. Everything has an electron attached to it. This electron is the lightning bolt. Everything vibrates. It is the motion of this bolt through time and space. Everything is Zeus. Everything. All the gods are Zeus. All of it comes from this one place. All of it is all of us, all at the same time. But we function as if we are individuated. Like, I really am me. I am necessary for everything else to exist. I have to be here. You have to be here. You're valuable. You're necessary. The gods will answer you when you speak to them because you're going to call on them. And the gods generated you so that you could call on them. That's why you're going to do it, is because you need to. We are the manifestation of Zeus. So one of the things that Zeus became after he swallowed this phallus thing and recreated the universe is he became Zeus Moira, Zeus Metis, right? Those are his epithets now. Moira, fate. He is fate. Everything that we experience is Moira, is fate, is Zeus's will. He is Zeus Moira. He is Zeus Metis. He is the cunning intellect of Zeus. He is the spirit of Zeus. Zeus pneumatoi, or pneuma something or other, the spirit of Zeus. He's the spirit that makes up everything around us, right? He is Metis. He is that confident manifestation, materialization of his will. Anyway, that's my cosmology, and that's what I believe. Basically, Zeus wasn't particularly wise, great, intelligent, perfect. Like, we know that the material world isn't perfect. In that way, I see the world as imperfect. It still isn't ideal. Bad things happen to good people. And why? I think it's because our demiurge doesn't know any better. I think we're figuring it out as we go along. And the whole evolution of human consciousness and whatever is us trying to figure out consistently how to do better as a people for ourselves. We're trying to balance liberty and justice, right? For example, we're trying to balance respect and trust. We're trying to learn how to trust other people's respect and respect other people's trust. We're trying to learn what love is. We're trying to learn how to create things without harming others. And it's a process, and everything that exists while we figure this out is really just existence, and it continues to consume itself, and it exists so that God can figure this shit out. So that's what we're trying to do. We are making a perfect life for ourselves, and we are teaching ourselves how to do that in the process. So everybody who goes through and figures out how things work a little bit better, we're making it better for everybody else. So in summary, conjuring spirits, magic, is using secret tech to call on our invisible friends to do what we want, right? Calling on spirits. It can be invocation, evocation, or conjuration, right? So conjuration is not, conjuration is the ritual where you actually call on the spirits. You're going to hear people call it invocation, and other people are going to call it evocation. They're going to say invocation is bringing a spirit into yourself, and evocation is calling a spirit out of yourself. These two words both mean prayer, but they've become specialized within our occult community. I think it's dumb, personally. I think no matter what you're doing, you're calling on a spirit. When you have a spirit present, it's going to have an effect on you internally. When you pluck a string in a guitar shop, every string that is tuned similarly is going to vibrate by the principle of resonance. In the same way, when you conjure a spirit, those aspects of yourself that are similar to that spirit are going to vibrate. They're going to be empowered. Like if you conjure a solar spirit, your solar powers are going to respond to that spirit. You're going to vibrate. It's called resonance, right? And that's part of how we progress and how we get initiated into these spheres, how we release these powers. It's through resonance. So the idea that you can invoke or evoke the spirits, like if safely keep a spirit not a part of you, it doesn't work that way. You're going to become more like every spirit you conjure, whether they're in a triangle or not. Similarly, the idea that you're invoking a spirit and becoming that spirit, you're not. So you can't really invoke a spirit and have it take over your body. There's no such thing as possession in real life. You could be obsessed by spirits. You can give yourself over to these spirits so that they have control of you. But at any time, a human being can take back control over their body. All right. The way I heard it best put was the Holy Spirit is a gentleman. And it was somebody who was talking about how people will pretend like the Holy Spirit is on them in a charismatic church, and they can't control themselves, and they are disruptive, and they are incoherent, and they are rude, and they're gropey, and they're doing all these terrible things, and they're saying it's the Holy Spirit. My pastor always said, no, the Holy Spirit is a gentleman. And what that means is no spirit takes over control of a body. And in my experience, I've never seen anybody really unable to stop themselves from behaving poorly, even if they are obsessed with a spirit or possessed by a spirit. Ultimately, people try to get out of responsibility for things, I think. But until I know otherwise, I will always assume that people are just faking it. And I'm sorry if you're not, but I don't really believe you. So that is important, I think, for people to remember. That these spirits can't really take control over you. So the idea of invocation being different from evocation, and whatever it is, I think they're both manifestations of conjuration. The spirits that we call on, again, it's gods, angels, intelligence, daemons, spirits, ghosts, demons, and shades. All these different spirits are types of spirits. The taxonomy of spirits is fascinating. Ultimately, though, you call on a spirit based on what you know about it. You have power to do so because of your secret occult lore and the knowledge of its name and its seal and the use of your voice. We'll talk about that later in the class, but it's the use of your voice that makes the spirits appear. The right that you have to call on spirits, it's your metis, it's your confidence, your knowledge and your wisdom of magical properties, your knowledge and wisdom and understanding of your cosmology, your ability to apply your cosmology to your experiences in a way that lets you predict what's going to happen next. This is your metis. This is your confidence. This is your magic. This is your power. Okay. Your power comes from what you know about the spirits. Your power is who you are, right? What are you? Like in the Hermetics, it teaches that you're the crown of creation. You're made in God's image. I am Aro, bitch. You know who I am? Do you know who I am? Right? It's this level of confidence that you have when you are speaking to the spirits. Do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? Do you have a right to be there? It also can come from this right to conjure the spirits. It also can come from who you know, like my HGA, my supernatural assistant, the perfect nature from the Picatrix. One of these entities has gone out and gotten you this contact with the spirits. It's what you know. It's the knowledge that you have. Your city, Hermopolis, your wood is ebony. All the secret lore that we build gives us the power to call on these spirits. What you've done, some conjurations include by my baptism, by my initiation, by my witch blood, by my attainment, by my oath, by my forces of this hour and day, by the wounds of Christ. Right? Whatever else in your cosmology grants you power over these spirits or the authority to call on them, or the whatever grants you the leverage, as BJ put it, to be able to make this move in the physical world. You're using that. If you don't have that, again, I recommend you go through the 7 spheres. You can do an initiation into the elemental kingdom. You obtain your supernatural assistant, and you start doing some daily meditations on these different magical practices, and understanding who you are, and understand that you are perfectly a manifestation of consciousness and energy and the 7 spheres and the 4 elements. And you are perfectly manifesting these things according to your will every day. Right. And when you understand that about yourself, then the rest of the world will start to sort of fall into place. Other ways, you can go through other initiatory systems. You can go through different magical training paths. There's the Golden Dawn techniques. I'm not a fan of those anymore. Awareness. Siddhartha one day was sitting under a tree and he realized something about how the universe works. Your awareness is going to be kicked off by your experiences. And when you have a shift in awareness, you're going to understand how to make magic work in different ways. It could be your birthright. It could be a pact that you make. By all means, conjure spirits and make a pact with them. It could be your metis. It can be the secret knowledge of the spirits that you get. Whatever it is, find your way to work with the spirits. All right, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to get some more water, and then we'll jump into the technology. The rest of this is going to go relatively quickly. I think the cosmology part is probably the big lift on all this stuff, and the reason is because that's what found the foundation and the core of your actual practice. The rest of this is just wood, stone, form, symbols, and why it works according to some grimoire techniques. All right, so I'll be back in just a quick moment. Actually, I have my water here, so I'm not even gonna bother. But if you need a break, go ahead and take a break, and I will. Yeah, I'll go ahead and start again at 5:45. All righty. Starting to shine a little bit here. Appreciate everybody still on. We got 30 people on. We are on pause right now. We've got probably another couple minutes. And I did have at least one other person has purchased the class while we were talking about it. This has been really successful. I got to say, I'm really happy with the number of people that purchased it. I'm excited about what comes next. I'm going to be doing the Seven Spheres classes to kind of go over how to use this conjuration thing to create your world the way I do, the practices that work out really great for me, and then I'm going to do a supernatural assistant class, the tutelary spirit, so people can get that going for them. And then I will have 3 things that I can point to as I go on and talk about this crazy Zeus stuff that will help people out. So I can say like, hey, just go do a solar rite to heal yourself, or you can use this stuff for trauma recovery by doing a Saturn rite, a Mars rite, and a Jupiter rite, and blah blah blah. I can talk about that stuff, and then when people are like, well, how do you do it? I can say, well, here's all 7 classes on this, and you can just go do that. Everything is going to cost like $25 a class. I figure that's a fair price. I am appalled at how expensive things are costing people in the occult community. I know that the stuff that people are producing is great. The quality of the materials is amazing, but like $600 and $700 and $800 for a class and how to be an occultist, I think is a lot more money than a lot of magicians have handy. And I wanted to offer a piecemeal approach to occult mastery that people could work out on their own at their own pace. And also the stuff I produce is a lot cheaper. It's less expensive, but it's also less quantity than you're going to get like if you go through like a Jason Miller class, it's going to teach you a complete approach to things. It's not going to be just a quick down and dirty, hey, here's a jack of all trades perspective on all the types of spirits that there are in an entire system of conjuration. It's not a high level overview. It's an actual deep dive into Hecate and all the epithets and working with them and these different approaches that were revealed to him personally and all this stuff. So it's actually a lot deeper. The stuff I produce is very I want to say it's like all stuff you can figure out on your own if you spent the weekend looking into any of it. You can just kind of open up esotericarchives.com and follow any of the pages and figure out one or more of the things that I've figured out about how the universe works. So by all means, do feel free to do that kind of thing. But I mean, I think the value I add is there's not like a system of hermetic attainment and a practice that leads to some hermetic version of enlightenment and understanding that is readily available to most magicians. And I think that the systems of spiritual attainment that are offered by the Golden Dawn and Thelema are a bunch of crap, and that they basically they help out some people who work on things in silence, but they don't really empower people. You don't see a lot of like Golden Dawn magicians out there. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe the quiet ones are out there. Who knows? But I mean, I think that you could be doing a lot more with the power of magic than they seem to be doing. So anyway, I want to offer people a path to powerful magic to create lives and heal damages and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and get back to it now. Thank you all for your patience, and we will jump right back in. Okay. So the technology. We're going to be talking a little bit about the technology of actually conjuring the spirit. We're going to start with the ritual implements, the implements that are necessary to perform a ritual that you use to conjure a spirit to change the world. So the first implement that we're going to talk about is the magician. The magician that is like part and parcel of the ritual. And we're going to talk about the ritual as if it started like in a planetary hour of Jupiter at like 4:38, whatever, on whatever day it is. And at 4:38, you're going to go start this ritual. When you show up at this ritual, you're going to need all of these implements. You're going to need your magicianness. Your magician is going to need to be ready for the actual ritual. He'll need to be wearing, they'll need to be wearing their clothes, the right clothes. They'll need to be properly clean. They'll have to be purified. They'll have to be properly initiated and consecrated. They'll have to be, hopefully they haven't had sex in the last 3 days, ritually pure, as it were. They have to actually be ready to be in the presence of the spirits without getting struck dead by whatever cosmological rules are there to strike them dead. They have to be wearing the right clothes that they picked up from the right dead clergy, so that, that they stole at midnight or whatever. They have to have all those things properly ready. So I'm not going to get into all that stuff. The magician is part of this, though, and the magician has to show up and be properly prepared. You also have your basic tools are going to be made out of wood, fire, and stone. And please read through the workbook on this. I wrote a lot of information on this stuff. Yeah. So the the tools. So the tools are basically a lot of them are made out of wood. I classify them by wood, fire, and stone because basically you can break down all the things you need to perform this conjuration in the way that I describe it. It's just stuff made out of wood, fire, and stone. So the things of wood, if you look at wands harvested on a Wednesday, The wands can represent a lot of things. They can represent the staff of Aaron, the staff of Moses that turned into a snake and consumed the other staffs of the other priests. They represent phalluses, obviously, the phallus of the sun, for example, that is the source of creation of all things on the earth. They represent a lot of things that direct your will and all this stuff. They have all these rules around them, like they have to be harvested at dawn on a Wednesday for the Grimorium Verum and for a lot of the Solomonic and Goetic practices, because they're Hermetic practices. And these Hermetic woods have to be harvested at Hermetic times. And, they have to be made out of almond, because Aaron's rod that sprouted was an almond rod that proved that he was the chosen priest for God. All these things have to go back to prove that you are representing God. So that the wand itself has the images of a six-pointed star with a yod in it, a Maltese cross. I think there's a pentagram on it. The names are An, Agla, and Tetragrammaton. An is the name of the sun in ancient Egyptian, according to Aleister Crowley, and the people of this time believed that kind of thing. Agla, Ata Gabor Le'olam Amen, is an anagram that stands for what I just said. That's thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Ata Gabor Le'olam Amen. Right, and that represents basically, if you look at the it goes back to this bowing down thing that you find in a lot of religions, including Hinduism, like Namaha. If you go through this whole the mantras, all of them that get to Namaha, you're saying I bow down, or it's not about me, it's about you. Om Shri Matre Namaha Namaha. All right, and it's like, oh, mother, it's all about you, it's not about me, it's not about me. Namaha. So Agla, thine is the kingdom and the glory and the power forever. Amen. It is true. It's not about me, it's all about you. Right? That's what the whole Agla thing is about. Alpha and Omega is the beginning and the end. Tetragrammaton is the four-lettered name of God that has 5 syllables, right? Tetragrammaton, 5 syllables for a 4-letter word. Ooh, the mystery of the 4 and the 5. Ooh. Anyway, all these things are symbolic of what they represent. And you put them all together and you have a wand that's going to represent you directing your will. The nice thing about wands is that you can use a finger to represent them, because the wand represents a phallus, and fingers also look like phalluses. So convenient. The other thing that you make out of wood is your table of practice, and that can be something that you engrave with. You can like carve it out and put any kind of like if you want to do like gold leafing, or you can do wood burning, or you can do wood inlays, or you can just draw it on paper. The table of practice has it's the other part of wood. It also represents the pantacle if you're doing your 4 elemental tools in the Golden Dawn. The pantacle is made out of wood, and you carve in it all of the things that represent your material world. Wood is important in your rituals because wood is basically it's the absorption of fire and the absorption of the sunlight over time, right? Everything that's made out of wood comes from a tree, and trees absorb sunlight, they absorb air, they absorb soil, they absorb water, and they form this wood. And when you're holding this wood in your hand, you're holding condensed sunlight, right? You're holding condensed life itself, right? And that light of the sun is being directed around according to your will. That's what you're holding in that wand. That's what that table of practice is this condensed light that is the foundation of what we're going to be creating and manifesting and materializing, right? That's what this wood represents, is this foundation of light that has been condensed and focused into one place. Fire. We'll talk a little bit about fire. Fire is the release of that light, right? So when you burn wood, it releases all the heat of the sun that tree absorbed over all those years. When you burn anything, you're releasing that fire, that stored sunlight, that stored energy. Like the earth is an open system, right? The energy that feeds life on the earth, the reason we don't fall into entropy and die, is because of the sun. The sun is constantly beaming energy into our planet. That's why we get to live. So the sun is shining down on us. Uh-oh. Somebody says my presentation is blank. Sorry. Thank you for saying that. There we go. All right. Fortunately, we went from technology to here. Virtual implements. We hadn't gotten very far. Okay. So, yes. So this is as far as we've gotten. The ritual tools here. So we've got wood. The wands are harvested at dawn on Wednesday. Fire, incense is our prayers rising to the heavens. So the other thing about fire is fire represents the highest element that in the material world. So when you pass through the seven spheres of the celestial realm and you turn things over to the elemental kingdom, fire is the highest element. It's the purest element. It's the closest to the spiritual realm. When you express the light that was stored in wooden things, when you burn things, you're expressing that light. It actually goes out and it releases the essence of that thing that was formed according to all of the elemental properties and the planetary properties into what it was. And it releases that, right? It carries things up to the highest levels, up to the spiritual realm. Our prayers are expressed through the incense and through the sense of our smells. Our offerings, our burnt offerings, are evaporating water offerings. They are alcohol offerings that evaporate, right? Our offerings are expressed through the air and they rise up to the highest levels of the spirit realm where the unmanifest is. And it's the fire that is the gateway that releases this energy into the spiritual world. It raises up the scent of our incense to the spiritual world. Our prayers, our words are expressed through our wind, our breath, our speaking of things. We express the words, the forms of that air. We symbolize it with our words and our language into what we want it to be. We form the meaning into a physical vibration that can be heard and communicated to other magicians, to other people, to other spirits. We can write it down. We can draw a design. Somebody else can build it. We can materialize this unmanifest thing through this wind, speaking things into being. It's this aspect of the interplay of the unmanifest and the manifest. Yeah. So stone is the other aspect of things, and within our conjuration, right? The stone is the scrying medium. The crystal that's described in the Trithemian art of conjuring spirits into crystals is just a lapidary about the size of an orange, is how it's described. And it's a sphere, and it's just a stone that light passes through. It's translucent. So what it represents, though, like a crystal, is basically condensed air, right? Air is the medium through which the unmanifest manifests, right? It's the transitional element between the manifest and the unmanifest world. So the spiritual world is going to manifest into the material world in this crystal that is clear and translucent, that captures light, but in a thick material thing that you can actually physically materially hold. So it's like it is literally this condensation point for air that you can see through, right? So that's why we use the stone. The table of practice is your other tool. It represents your cosmology. It has all the spiritual elements that an idea has to pass through before it materializes. It has the entities that represent the material world, and it has a place that it can materialize in. And we'll talk more about that. And the only other thing that you need to do a conjuration is a script. So when you're getting ready to do your actual conjuration of the spirits, the thing that lets you do the magic that changes the world, you're going to need yourself, your magician. You're going to need your tools. You're going to need a wand, your wooden tools, a wand, and a table of practice. You're going to need some fire, an incense burner or a incense stick, a lighter, a candle of some type, and you're going to need a stone or something to condense the air in so you can see the spirits and interact with them. So you can use water. Water works for that because it's thick air, and you can actually condense the spirits in that as well. So like a shot glass or a coffee mug is also effective. Let's see. Excuse me. I want to talk about the magic circle. The magic circle in the table practice is how we actually conjure spirits. If we look at this image here is from the Lemegeton. I'm sorry, I have something stuck in my stomach here. So this is the magic circle of the Lemegeton, and from the Goetia. And you can see that it has a circle. Inside the circle, you've got the four hexagrams that say Adonai in it. You've got the square in the middle of it. Outside the circle, you've got a triangle with a circle in it. And each one of these shapes represents an aspect of the technology, the 16th century technology that goes into, 15th century technology that goes into making spirits manifest. And the rules that govern this technology can be found in Agrippa, the second book of occult philosophy, book 2, chapter 23, where he describes squares and circles and triangles and the geometric forms. And in the workbook, it's actually all copied into one of the appendices, but I'm just going to summarize it here. So squares represent the elemental world. Anything that has to do with four has to do with earth, air, fire, and water. It's the material world. It is our manifest existence. Squares and cubes. Cubes also represent space. The cube of space is a big deal in Golden Dawn systems. It will represent every aspect of existence. If you take the cross of the Rose Cross and fold it over, you have a cube of space. It's a mystery of materialization because the cross represents a phallus and the rose represents it's a vagina, and the coming together of the two forms the cube of space, right? It's the creative principle expresses itself through space. So anyway, cubes, altars. Anytime you have an altar, it's a square. Anytime you have your like the double cube altar is something that I'm actually going to be making for myself again. Very convenient to have two 18-inch cubes that you can use for stuff. You put that in the middle. That's your square. It represents the Benben stone. It represents your material realm. It represents the foundation of existence. It's where everything starts from. So there's a square to start everything. When we do our table practice, it starts with a square on the outside. You've got your circles of protection. Circles offer protection. The reason is because when a spirit approaches a circle or any line, basically geometrically, anytime a spirit gets involved with geometry, it has to follow the line. This is like a spiritual law. So when a spirit finds a circle, it has to follow the line until it reaches the end. While it's doing that, it's because it's a circle, it'll just go forever and ever in circles. So that's how a circle protects you from spirits. In the same way that a sea bear cannot cross a circle, a spirit cannot cross a circle. So anyway, so that's how a circle protects you magically. Within the circle, you can see here, it has all of the aspects of the 10 spheres from Agrippa's scale of the number 10. That's what shows up in the Lemegeton. It's all the names of the 10 spheres, the angels that are associated with them, the choirs of spirits of each of the spheres, and the planetary symbol of the sphere. So all those things are included here. So it's like this mega thing. You also have to put that on your lion skin belt if you're going to be working with the Lemegeton. But basically, you're just saying, look, I really know how the universe works. I know everybody who rules all the gates of the universe. And I know what all the secret seals of all the people that rule all the gates are. And I know what their choirs are. I know what city they're from. And I know what their wood is. And I know what time to call them. And I know all that crap. Look how awesome I am. That's what your circle says on this particular image. Triangles are the other thing. Triangles represent materialization points. When you take your two points, when you have a point, you have a point. When you have 2 points, you can create a line. When you have 3 points, you can create a triangle. All right. The triangle is the first shape that you can form when you're just creating points on space. This is just a basic geometric principle. So you take 2 points and you draw a line between them. You curve the line and you have a circle, and that's an infinite line that a spirit can't find. 3 points becomes a point of manifestation. It's the first shape that you can have. So your shape is a triangle. It represents materialization. It has Mikael in this image, and then within that has another circle, right? So it's like we're going to materialize you in a place that you can't leave. Is basically what the technology of this particular thing says. So that's the magic circle. And now if we look at the table of practice, I want to talk a little bit real quick about how that magic circle informs where I ended up with things. So I'll go into a little bit about that. So the 7 gates of initiation. I believe that all right, so the table of practice has this. It has the 7 archangels on it, the 7 planets, the 4 elemental kings, and then a triangle of manifestation in it. And I think this is sufficient for me to conjure the spirits because it's close enough, right, for me. And the reason I think that is because when I was doing all this stuff, one of the things I was doing was I was creating this big magic circle. I was making a 9-foot one in my garage, and I was hand painting it. And I had gotten most of it done when the house fire hit, and I had to like stop operations on it. But by the time I was done creating just this circle, I had gone through a complete initiatory process, right? And I didn't realize what I was doing when I got started on it. But by the time I was done painting the first names of the heavens and the seals of the spirits and the names of the spirits, I felt the spirits and the worm with me. I felt it. And the more meticulous I had to be, the more attention I had to pay to the details of creating this circle, the more I felt the presence of the spirits. So when I say in this room right now are the essences of all the planets of the spheres, what I mean is right now they're all here. And as soon as I start writing the name Venus with the symbol of Venus and the name Anael and it's the Anael seal, it's going to condense all that together. And I mean that because I've done it and that's what happened. All right. And when they're present, it creates that resonance in your sphere. It creates an initiatory experience that causes change in the material world and how you express that energy. All that stuff happens. So just by creating this magic circle, just by creating it, you begin this initiatory process of getting the power to call on these spirits. So just by creating the circle in preparation for the megaton work, the magician is performing the initiations he needs to be able to call on the spirits. So that's why it's so necessary to build these tools for the grimoires. That's why they had to be built, was so that you could actually go through this initiation process, because as you make the tools, you're conjuring the spirits that grant you the power that is represented in that tool to call in the spirits. Right? It's a self-fulfilling thing. So by making you create the seal, the grimoire makes you get the power to use it. That's pretty freaking cool, in my opinion. So that's where that was coming from. The understanding that the creating it on paper. So I was practicing all this stuff on paper. In your workbook, you're going to find that there is a blank seal that you can fill out yourself. Fill it out with all the information from the scale of the number 10 and Agrippa's it's book 2, I think chapter, I want to say 13. But it's the scale of the number 10. Just put that information on it. Just write it out in that circle. When you're done doing that, you're going to have a different perspective on life. Okay. I also include all that information in one of these things here. Here it is. So this is all the planetary names of the angels. If you take all of these and just put Metatron, sphere of the prime mover, seraphim, right? And this is its name in Hebrew, right? If you put that name on there and then go put a some kind of symbol, and you go to the next one and do this symbol, cherubim, Yophiel, sphere of the zodiac, and then a symbol, and then this thing, and then thrones, this symbol, Tzafkiel. If you do that around uh, this magic circle blank, just put that information in here. Start in the east, pretend like the right side is east. Start there and go all the way around. You will have an initiatory experience that blows your mind. I promise you. So just do that. Around these four things, put Adonai, right? In each of the triangles, you put one of the letters of Adonai, Adonai, Adonai. When you do that, you're conjuring one of the elemental kings. All right, try putting his name in there. Orion's in the east, Amaymon in the south, Paimon in the west, um, uh, Edgin in the north. Okay, that's a group of scale the number 4. You put their names in there, see what happens. All right, this is an initiatory process. Fill this out. Okay, it changes your life. Okay, let's see here. So anyway, all of this stuff, like I was going through all this stuff in preparation for doing Goetia work. Then I wanted to actually practice doing some conjuration. This was also I could learn how to do Enochian, and I wanted to practice with just a smaller number of angels than the Enochians. So I decided I was going to work on the Trithemian art of drawing spirits into crystals, because it was just 7 planetary spirits. So this slide is supposed to be like a little bit more indicative of what the process is than it really is. But the process is basically, it explains like what you're supposed to do. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Our dog's prison crystals. No. So anyway, ConjureClass workbook. All right. So I do have all this information in here somewhere. I just have to find it, and then I'll be able to reference it. Yeah. All right. So, all right. It says procure of a lapidary, a good, clear, pellucid crystal in the bigness of a small orange, about 1.5 inch in diameter. So it tells you to get a crystal ball about 1.5 inches. You put a plate of gold around it, the back, and then you're supposed to put it in an ivory or ebony pedestal. And it's supposed to look like it does in this drawing here, where you see the names of the angels around it. That's what it's supposed to look like. And then let there be engraved a circle around the crystal with these characters around the circle next to the crystal, and it has a picture of a the hexagram with a yod in it, a pentagram, and a Maltese cross. So those 4 things have to be in this triangle that it's describing. And if you look up at the top of this corner, you can see that the triangle with a yod in it, and it says that they should be in a triangle. So I thought maybe that should be in a triangle. And I kind of read through it, and I didn't entirely understand it. But if you go on and read through it, it kind of describes this picture up here, and when you're done reading through it, you can see that why I kind of ended up with this image. And I thought this was an accurate depiction of what that paragraph said when I was done writing it or putting it together. And I was in a hurry to call on Gabriel because it was the hour of the moon. So I just took this and I put a crystal on it, and I called on Gabriel, and Gabriel showed up, and it scared the crap out of me. It was my first experience with an angel, and I've been working with it ever since. But I've since learned that this is absolutely not the right way to put it. It's not it's not what it meant at all. And when I read back over it years later, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I ended up with that as a table of practice. Jake Stratton Kemp at one point did say every time he sees this, he just wanted to put a big red X over it and say no. And there's reasons for that, but I don't really care anymore, because if you look at this circle, one of the reasons I ended up with this is because It looks like one of these circles. It has the element, the cosmology and the outer circle all the way around it. Instead of the 10, it only has 7, but guess what? I only work with 7 planets. It has the 4 elemental kings, Edgen, Orion, Amamen, and Payman. It has this triangle of manifestation. All right. All the things that you need to conjure things in the Lemegeton are represented here on this table of practice. And the whole thing is on a giant square. So there's your square of manifestation, your circle of protection, your triangle of materialization. You've got everything that you need right there to do this in full conjuration. All right. You've got the symbols and the planets. And if you notice, I do not go from the 10th sphere down to the first sphere. What I do instead is I only have 7 spheres, and I have Mercury and Saturn in the north. I've got the sun and Mars in the east. I've got the moon in the south, and I've got Venus and Jupiter in the west. All right, so why is that? If you look at the scale of the number 4, it says what directions each of the planets are in. All right. So this is actually what direction each of the planets are in according to the scale of the number 4. Edgen is in the north, Orion's is in the east, Amamen is in the south, and Payman is in the west, because that's the 4 directions associated with the scale of the number 4 from Agrippa. This whole thing is consistent with Agrippa's view of the universe as expressed in that table. Everything about how the universe works is expressed in this image according to the path of materialization, the chain of manifestation that expresses ideas through the 7 spheres and the 4 elements into a materialized world. Everything is materialized here in this symbol. Okay, that's why it's important that something is this simple and this clear, and yet also that profound. In my opinion, that's how you can make it all work. So the only other thing you need for a conjuration is a symbol of the spirit. And in Trithemius, they use a lamen for this, but you can use also seals or sigils. The lamen is worn over the heart. The heart is the seat of the soul, right? But it's where your breath comes from. It's where the source of your words are going to come from, and you put it over your heart because you're calling out that spirit. You're going to call it into being. So the lamen represents the spirit. It has the seal of the spirit. We'll talk about what it goes on a Trithemian lamen in just a minute. But in general, a lamen is any seal of the spirit. I use metal seals right now for each of the 7 planetary planets, and for the different planetary talismans that I work with. I use metal seals, and I put them on my conjure box, and it lights up a crystal ball so I can call in the spirit. You can also hold your lamen of the spirit in your left hand. The key part about it is that it has the name and the seal of the spirit. It doesn't really matter so much where it ends up, in my opinion, but you want it in some place where you can access it during the rite. Again, it's the physical representation of that spirit, and that's what's important. Is that you have that action, that activity of having created that link to that spirit so that it has a physical materialization point that it can manifest through. And we'll talk about that real quick, because these are talismans. All right. And basically a talisman is any kind of physical object. I don't know if you're an animist or not, but basically animists believe that everything that exists has a spirit. If you go back to my cosmology, I believe everything that exists is a manifestation of Zeus. If you want to think about everything that exists as being a part of that conscious pool, maybe it has a consciousness. Maybe the whole yokai view of things of the animistic Shinto belief system, the Chinese Taoist perspective of everything having a spirit, maybe those are real ways of looking at things. Zeus's lightning bolt is in all, and it can pool into conscious awareness and everything, right? So a talisman is a pool of consciousness directed to coalesce a certain type of Zeusness. Everything that symbol represents, the seal of the talisman, the seal of the spirit, the metal of the talisman, if it's a metal that's made in the right hour on the day of Zeus's holy hour, Jupiter, Thursday at dawn, right? In his hour on his day, it's consecrated. It's a holy thing that is super Zeusy, right? and you put that with the seal of Zadkiel on it. So it's a specific kind of Jupiter that has been super focused into it, right? So that's a talisman, and the talisman creates a physical body for that spirit to work through, for that energy to manifest. So locally, it has a place to manifest and materialize, and it literally does because you can see it. And that's what the value of that talisman is. It is a body that the spirits can work through. The planetary lamen include the 12 names of the god on the outside of them. And this is according to Trithemius. This is also, I think, from the fourth book of occult philosophy or the Heptameron. I'm not sure exactly which one recommends this particular form of conjuring spirits, but it's pretty common in the 16th century. It contains the 12 names of God on the outside, El Escure, Escurcure, Ja, a bunch of others. And then it's got the symbol of the spirit. It's got the name of the spirit in Hebrew above a hexagram. It's got a hexagram and 4 pentacles on it. The hexagram, inside the hexagram, it has the seal of the spirit and the name of the spirit again, but this time in English. And like I said, the seal of it. And on the outside, there's four seals. There's 4 pentagrams, and the pentagrams, it says that you should have one for each spirit that you're calling on. So this hexagram, like if you're calling, you could have like Tzadkiel and maybe, I don't know, Yophiel is another Jupiter spirit. Maybe you have his name in there too. And so you've got Jophiel and you've got Zadkiel. It says to put 1 star for each spirit that you're conjuring, never fewer than 4. So what that means is that you've always got at least 4 spirits present. And who are they going to be? Edgin and Maimon, Orions, and Payman, right? They're your 4 elemental kings. So your 4 pentagrams are always going to represent the 4 elemental kings. I've never bothered putting extra pentagrams on anything. I have always only ever just used the talismans. And when I create a metal talisman, all I put on it is the seal of the spirit and sometimes its name, but you always just the seal. And in my experience, just drawing the seal on a piece of paper is sufficient for you to have a contact and a connection and a communication with the energies that are represented by that seal. All right, and here's a picture of the 7 lamens of the planets. You can see the name in Hebrew, the hexagram, the symbol of the planet, the name in English. Around the outside, you've got the 12 names of God. You got the 4 pentagrams in there, and you've got one for each of the planets. In the extra material in the appendices, you will find all of those. You can print those off. You can trace them. I know people who have embroidered them on cloth and have used those cloths as their conjuration devices. You could somebody else made a travel set out of cardstock that she made folded into envelopes and carried with her, and had a conjure kit that she could take with her, had folded out a table of practice. It's incredibly useful for this kind of thing. Wonderful way to have the powers of creation at hand. All right. So the next part of ritual is using your words, right? Oratory is conjure. And I talked earlier about how breath is the beginning of conjure. We spoke about how we assume that there's all these entities in the invisible world. The invisible world is filled with these entities and these spirits and these daemons and these angeloi and these theoi, these gods, these spirits, but they all start with breath. If you look at the root words of all these words that we're using to speak to these entities, ruach in Hebrew, pneuma in Greek, spirit, right? Ghost. All these words go back to some root word that means breath or wind or some type of air in motion. Okay. That's what spirituality is all about. There's an argument that every entity that we conjure is an aerial spirit, because all spirit is breath. All life requires breath, right? In theory. So that's where that comes from. When it comes to speaking, when it comes to doing this ritual, you can have all these materials present, and until you actually do something and start speaking, you aren't doing magic. It's not magic until you use your words and you speak things into being. Using your words is how you do magic. You have to speak things into being. Thoth is the god of magic and the god of writing for a reason. When you write down your words, you are materializing an effect in the material world, right? It is magical to write things down. You can plan things, you can change the future, you can communicate over long distances, you can do amazing things by writing, right? So that's why words are important, right? Symbolic expressions. And it always goes back to communicating that out loud. How was the universe created? You know, Luke's fiat. Fiat. It was by command. It must be, right? So, all right. So if we look at the actual conjure script, the script is where you use your voice. It's where you start to speak your magic into being. The first thing in the Trithemian art is where you ask God to let you see and enlighten yourself. The next thing that you do is you ask God to bless the stone and allow the magician to see the spirits in the stone, because he's good and make it work out to the accomplishment of what he wants. So when you start your script, the very first thing that Trithemius tells you to do is ask God to let you see so that you can actually see the spirits, and then ask God to bless the stone so that only good spirits can show up. And then ask God to let you see the spirits in the stone because you're so good and you're so cool. You justify your right to see the spirits to God. And then you say that you ask God to make sure it works out the way you want it to. And then you consecrate the space around you, right? And banish everything negative so that it's all only positive stuff. And then you ask God to bless, after you bless the space, you ask God to bless the fire so that it releases all this sunlight of the stuff in the best possible way. And then you ask God, then you actually call the spirits to be present, because you've got this holy place for them to show up. You've got this holy stone for them to show up, and God's agreed to enlighten you and let you see the stone. And then you've called the spirits and they're going to show up in the stone. And then you talk to him and he gives you a whole script of things that you ask the spirits. And then you write down what they say. He gives you all the instructions for a special book, and you write down what they say, and then you send them on their way, right? And that's your script. That's what you say, and that's where you're actually doing the entire magical rite. And those are the pieces that are recommended. And if you look at the Lemegeton in the Goetia, it has a much more complicated structure for the rite. It has you do all this vestments of the spirits. You dress yourself, you dress the circle, you dress the seer, you do the whole conjuration of the space. You call on God to bless yourself, you call on God to bring the spirits, you bind the spirits, you threaten the spirits. You go through all this process, but again, it's all oratory. It doesn't start until you start speaking and making the prayers. That's the way it actually gets kicked off. Let's see here. All right. Table works. I've used it. Me too. Okay, great. I'm glad that everybody's enjoying that. Okay, so that's basically how we create things. And if you look at these pictures, these are all the pictures of somebody speaking their reality into being and creating things in the material world according to their minds, according to their unseen things. So once the spirits arrive, once you've done all the conjuration of the spirits and you've called them by God's name to show up, they show up in the crystal and you have to see them. So scrying is the first step. Scrying is a complicated thing. It's the number one thing that people always ask me about. I encouraged my ex to do a bunch of scrying stuff, and she was very good at that. But if you're interested, by all means, pursue that. But the basics of scrying that I recommend to people, like Patrick Dunn taught me all this stuff. And basically, if you use your imagination, if you understand how your imagination works, traditionally in Kabbalah, back in the Greek metaphysical schools, the Pythagorean schools, the mystery schools, if you look at the the medieval learning techniques in the 16th century with the memory palaces and whatnot. Uh, the the way the way your imagination worked was it was a bidirectional communication device for the spirits, right? So you would imagine something, and the spirits would then enliven it and take over your imagined image, and they would communicate with you that way. If you have ever had an experience with a spirit where it shows you a scene that's going on and you interact with that scene, and then you come out of it and you've healed a person, a client that asked you to do a healing, or if you've asked to understand a situation and you've received a vision that explains things metaphorically that are going on, and you're telling your client, hey, this indicates to me that you're having problems with your mother and all this stuff, right? And you're interpreting this vision that you're seeing, and it might not look anything like what you're saying, but it all makes sense to the client. That's what scrying is like. You imagine a picture and you picture it until the spirits take over. Think of one of the techniques is like for conjuring archangels in the Kabbalistic Merkava traditions. You meditate on the name of the spirit. You picture the letters that spell it out in Hebrew, 40 feet tall, and you picture yourself as a mode of consciousness, a flaming mode of consciousness, and you picture yourself tracing each letter 40 feet tall, up and down, faster and faster, until that flame of your mote consciousness has ignited the entire letters, until they are burning on their own, until the letters themselves begin to move, right? And you hold that image in your mind until it moves on its own. And that's when you know that the spirit's present. So that's how that works. When you imagine a scene, you picture it in your mind and you wait for it to move on its own. That's how spirits communicate with you. When you're scrying with something, you imagine a picture inside the stone. You imagine the spirit communicating to you in images that appear in the stone. You imagine the images appearing. You let that happen in your mind's eye, and then the spirit can communicate with you, and it enlivens the stone with the images that you're looking for. So that's the first thing that you do when a spirit arrives. You ask it what's going on. You tell it. You ask it to reveal anything about itself. If you're doing an initiation, you can just read through the Orphic hymn at that point, and then sit and bask in its energies and let it change you. And then you let it go, meditate on its seals and its images and whatnot, and let it go. You can do that if that's what you're doing as an initiation thing. But if you're asking for something, this is the point after you've gotten them present where you actually get what you're asking for. Always make sure that when you're phrasing things, you're including the pieces of the lore that represent what it is that you want. Be willing to speak to the spirit along the way, like receive this offering of sage because it is holy to you and it represents wisdom to you and you enjoy its smells. Accept this offering of the dry, windy mountainsides of Colorado that capture the sunlight and this day and release its energy into the manifestation of my desires. Let's see. Joseph asks if I've ever lost the ability to scry for a period. I have not personally. I try not to believe in that kind of thing. I don't think that we can actually lose anything for good or anything like that. I usually when I lose skills or abilities that I've had for a while, it's mostly because I just forgot about them. And if I go back over the practices that I did to get them in the first place, I usually get them back. And for me, I picture this chapel in the woods, and I go down around the basement in the back. There's like an entrance to the basement where all the administrative stuff is. So I go in the office in the back, and underneath there's an assistant down there that helps me out. And there's all of my Akashic records and all my spiritual past lives are all stored in the basement of this chapel in the middle of a forest. So I can always go back there and get my stuff. So I have this tool that lets me reaccess that stuff. So anyway, once you conjure the spirits and once they're present, that's when you ask them to help you out, and you say the usual. So after you conjure Hermes with a Greek magical fiery rite, then you ask Hermes to bless your particular business or a race that the ponies are in, or your particular horse in a race, or to provide you with information that you're looking for. Um, your your statement of intent is what you say here, and you include the pieces of the mythology. So like, as you tricked Apollo with over the cattle, or as you appeased Apollo with the offering of your lute, O Hermes, so also bring me the favor of my enemies who I have offended, right? Give me something to give them that I could buy their favor, right? So you can ask for that kind of thing. That's one way to phrase your statement of intent. Another thing you can do, also make sure you always speak from the heart, right? So your desires and your intent shape everything. Like your expectations, your knowledge, and your lore are going to are going to largely determine like how effective your magic is, and your ability to conjure these spirits and for them to answer and be powerfully active for you are going to rely on your faith and your knowledge, your gnosis, your firm belief in your cellular memory that this magic is effective, because you've earned it, right? And you've seen it, and you know it's going to work. It's going to work for you even more because of that metis, that gnosis, that knowledge, that confidence, right? Getting all of that, once you have all that, you're able to speak from the heart, right? And speaking confidently, speaking from a place of metis, voicing that manifestation, knowing that your voice is how things come into being, with that confidence and that power is very important when you're actually expressing your statements of intent. And it comes with time. It doesn't start out that way. Um, but like one of the things in Pirates of the Caribbean where it talks about speaking to Calypso, it says you're saying it wrong. You have to say it as if to a lover. You know, you have to express things to these spirits as if it's emotionally important to you, right? Intentionally. Don't just speak uh, words by rote. Speak it with emotion. The more powerful your emotions are about anything, the more powerful your effects are going to be. Okay. If you're angry and you do a curse, you're going to have destruction come about as a result of it. If you feel super self-righteous and super confident when you're cursing someone, it's going to be super effective. But if you kind of feel like it's sort of your fault and you knew it was your fault, and you're trying to curse someone just to kind of feel better about things, it never kind of works out. It just sort of is weak, and you have more backlash from that kind of thing, you know. But if you're acting right and you're doing the right thing, you'll always have positive results in your magic. So, in my experience, so anyway, speak from the heart, speak with confidence, speak boldly, speak as if what you're saying were true, and you'll find that it often does follow through and become that. After the present, if you're not asking for something, you're often making things, right? So you're asking them to ensoul an object. If you're consecrating your talisman, there's a Helios rite for consecrating all things. You conjure Helios, you call him by all of his names and where he's at different parts of the day and the animals and all this shit. And once he's there and he's done, you ask him to bless this talisman that he's blessing, right? So you say that, you say, bless this talisman so that it does everything that this talisman is supposed to do. Empower it to bring me luck. Empower it to cause miraculous things to happen according to the will. Let the spirits that represent this force on the planet support it in every way. Tell it what to do. Tell the spirit that you've called and the forces that you've conjured, tell it what it's supposed to do. Speak it into being. Speak your statement of intent, but also ensoul the object. Ask the spirit to live in it, to work through it, and to use that talisman as the body through which to influence everything around it. It becomes a nexus point that those energies impact the world around you. Make sure that you are quoting like the thing about the talisman that you want it to do, right? Because that's how you frame that energy, you crystallize it into that object. If you're doing spells, call on the spirits to bless the implements, to bless the ingredients. My wife does an amazing candle magic spell. She's a witch. She's a witch, and she's a great witch, right? And she blesses all the ingredients. She conjures the spirits, and then she blesses them and tells them what they're supposed to do. She empowers them as she goes. She wrote a ritual for Artemis. It's amazing, and it's really cool how she does it. But you speak to your entities to bless all the ingredients, and you speak to the ingredients to be blessed and to receive the empowerment of the spirits, right? So you tell everything what to do throughout the whole thing. And then you also make your offerings. So again, it's fire. Fire raises up everything up to the highest heavens, and it permeates existence to the invisible realm. And again, everything like smells. They're all, if you think of them all as being aerial spirits, it's always a scent that they like. The smell of burning fat, the smell of the incense burning, the smell of the herbs that you're offering, the smell of the flowers. When you offer a flower, it's the smell of the flowers that they like. It's the color of the light that passes through the air. It's everything that passes through the air. So essential oils, you can rub those on their talismans as offerings. Anything that carries that scent into the air is useful for them. Okay, so that's how offerings work for that. Making pacts with spirits also after they're there. Always make sure that before you let them go, the first time you conjure a spirit, you say, "And you, by your name, I ask that next time I call upon you by your name and your seal," and you point to the seal, and you say that you come immediately without this whole conjuration business, right? So going forward, you don't have to call them. A conjuration rite is only supposed to be used the first time you talk to a spirit, believe it or not. You don't have to do this crap every single time. I've included a short form of a conjuration because honestly, I feel better about the presence of a spirit after I do a little bit of a conjuration. I always feel better. So the more I feel confident, the better my magic works. But technically, if you have their name and their seal, if you have their talisman, you have them because their body is with you and they're operating through it on your environment. Okay. So anyway, that's how that works. So let me take a look here. Somebody had another comment here I wanted to see. Is it safe to actually have the table of practice inside the magic circle with you to conjure spirits, whether they are celestial or infernal? And can the spirit's energy have a harmful effect on the magician when using the table of practice inside the magic circle? For instance, making him or her feel dizzy, choked, or suffocated, etc. Yes, all that. So yes, I guess is the short answer. Let me go back to my table of practice here. So let's go back here. So the triangle of manifestation over in the east, we have a triangle with a circle in it. It's outside the circle, right? The magician is inside the circle. He's in a square. There's a circle over here. The spirit goes in the circle. There's a triangle around it to materialize a circle. And then there's another circle protecting the magician. So the spirit can't pass through those two circles to the three circles to get to the magician who's in his tower of power in the middle in the square. On the table of practice, the triangle's in the middle. So it's in the middle, and then there's another circle around it. The 4 elemental kings are in there, and then there's another circle around it. And then there's the 7 planetary governors, and then there's another circle around it. And then the magician is on the outside. So the magician is outside the square. So the Tower of Power is outside this. So instead of being inside the circle, the magic circle of the Lemegeton, you're inside the circle and you're calling out the spirit out there. You're outside the circle. The human is outside the circle here, and you're calling the spirit into the triangle. So yes, you're just as shielded with a table of practice here as you would be in the Lemegeton's approach. It's exactly the same number of circles between you and the triangle. Exactly the same representations of your cosmology are in place, and the exact same sources of power are represented. So you are just as safe with the table of practice as you are with a magic circle. Now, that said, the question was, is it safe to do this? Well, no. So it's never safe to do magic, you guys. This is always dangerous. Okay, it's dangerous to get out of bed in the morning. It's dangerous to breathe. But when you start meddling with the invisible forces that create experienced reality, meddling with forces you barely understand, let's be honest, I barely understand this crap after 20, 30 years of doing this crap. I barely have scratched the surface. I'm teaching people how to scratch the surface. Okay. We don't know what we're going to do. We don't know what's going to happen. We never do. Okay. I just got a new job a few months ago. My company ended up selling itself. You don't know what's going to happen. You base your plans on what you know today and what you think is going to happen next. Your cosmology is going to inform your understanding of things. Your cosmology, your understanding of how the universe works, is going to help you understand what's going to happen next. But it's not safe. It's never going to be safe. Okay. One of the reasons I know I'm not doing the course on restoring your mental health is because it's not safe. It could trigger some stuff in people that causes them to self-harm or unalive themselves. That would suck. I would hate that to have been a part of that, and I had people that were already jumping on it to do it without a therapist, right? Without any constraints or restraints in place. And I mean, if my kid did that, like talk to somebody on the internet and ended up unaliving themselves, I'd be pissed at that person. I'd go after them with lawsuits, or I could see somebody doing that. And I don't want that, right? So none of this stuff is safe, right? It's not safe. I don't want to be on the hook for this because it's not safe. Okay. So but it's just as safe. But the results that you're expressing here, absolutely uh you can definitely feel the energy. It can have a negative effect on a human. You can feel the pressure of a spirit in the room with you. I've had a spirit show up once that scared the crap out of me. I thought I was going to die. I ended up having a heart attack a couple of weeks later, but I don't know if it was because I was cursed or just because I was stressed or because of the spirit or what. But I did almost die as a result after having experienced this spirit's presence. They can be frightening as crap. All right, it's the truth. At the same time, as soon as I asked that spirit to leave, it left. There has never been a spiritual experience I've had where the spirit did not respond directly to the powers that called it in the first place. I've never called on anything that was stronger than me that wouldn't leave as soon as I asked. The Holy Spirit is a gentleman. None of these spirits have ever forced me to do anything that I didn't want to have happen. And as soon as I disagreed, they all respected my consent. As soon as I asked any spirit to go and I was like serious, they left. I've never had any problems with them. Why? Because I think pretty highly of myself, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's because I was blessed and highly favored. Maybe it's my witch blood. I don't know. Whatever it is, I've never run into any problems. So is it safe? It's as safe as you want it to be. You get what you expect. If you're scared, you're going to have scary experiences. And as you build that confidence, that metis, you won't be scared anymore. I'm not scared. I'll conjure Cthulhu. I have conjured Cthulhu. I've conjured Nyarlathotep. Concepts that people ought not to be messing with. I've messed with them because I don't care. I'm not scared of it because I know who I am and I know what my relationship is to everything else. My metis is strong, my magical understanding is strong, and I think everybody else can be just as strong and just as confident as I am. Whatever. It's not that dangerous. But it's fun to have these experiences. It's fun to be scared. It's fun to be worried about things like that. It's fun to have a heart attack, even as long as it doesn't kill you. It's fun to go through a lot of extreme events. Whether it's your cup of tea or not, it's up to you. But for me, I enjoy that kind of thing. So whatever. Let's see. Somebody said, do you have to use the Hebrew lettering? Can you swap Hebrew for Enochian? Absolutely. You can use whatever you want. I have been using English lately because it's more meaningful to me. So I actually have stopped using Hebrew because I don't know what it means. I don't pronounce it right. I am not very good at it. So it part of it is this whole appropriation thing. I don't want to appropriate Hebrew if I'm not Jewish. I don't need to. I can speak Greek badly, and it's fine. It's just more honest, I think. So anyway, after they've arrived, let's move on with the class here. After they've arrived, you send them on their way. So I always say at the end of a ritual, as you came in peace, so go in power. Somebody asked me earlier this week whether or not I banish at the end of a ritual, and I don't banish. I did a whole video on why I don't banish, and basically I don't banish because I don't believe it's necessary. I think first of all, the table of practice has all the elements of the banishing in it. And if you've built the table of practice, you've got your banishing has already been performed. But also the opening of my rite itself calls on my knowledge and understanding of my cosmology and establishes that everything that hears my voice is going to do what I say because it's there as a manifestation of the same power that I am. And we're all on the same team and we're all here to do the same thing, which is what I want. Right. And it follows along because I said so. But at the end of the ritual, I tell them that as they came in peace, so go forth in power. I do not banish again. I just let them go. I tell them not only to go, but go in power, go in joy. Over the next couple of weeks, you look for results. If you don't see your results in a couple of weeks, do the magic again. If you're worried about it, do divinations. Trust your divinations. Take your notes. Take pictures of your divinations. Read your tarot cards. Write down what you think it means. Write down what it would mean for someone else if you were reading for them. It gives you a more objective perspective on things. And look for your results. If you don't get the results you want, do the magic again. If you don't get the results you want and you want to see why, ask the spirits why you didn't get what you want. Ask them to show you in images and in answers that even you can understand, because otherwise it's hard to keep up with. Again, 2 weeks is your time period. Your table of practice, again, it has 7 planets, 7 archangels, 4 elements, a triangle manifestation. As above, so below with a yod, basically is your Shiva lingam. It represents that creative force of expressing things. It's got the Maltese cross representing the crossroads, and the pentagram representing Aphrodite or Rainos, which is Aphrodite, who, as the Titan, created from Uranus herself. Anyway, this slide shows the altar layout when you actually start doing the ritual. This is all you need. It's a candlestick, a table of practice, your scrying medium, and your wand and an incense burner. This is all you really need to do this magic. This is all stuff you can do with a piece of paper and your finger, a tea light candle, and a stick of incense, and a cup of water. All right, this is not hard to do the magic. If you go through the appendices, you'll have everything you need to do the magic tonight if you really want to. If you're interested, there's also the 7 Spheres classes are going to be coming up. Highly recommend them to everybody. You should totally take part of them. They're going to cover the initiations, but also the different aspects of the deities, the epithets for the deities of each of the planets, what kind of practical magic you can do with them, and what kind of spiritual magic you can expect from your initiatory practices with them. As well, and also some methods I have for some regular practices. It's 8 classes, $200 altogether, $25 a class. I don't know why it says $225 total. Probably because I can't do math. All right, so for the rest of the material here, this is all for your personal growth and your initiatory purposes. A blank magic circle that you can fill out using the scale of the number 10, the 4 elemental seals. Regarding the 4 elemental seals, for years and years and years, I wanted to conjure the elemental kings, but I didn't have a symbol to use to represent them. I had all the seals for these angels, but they were the planetary seals. I couldn't use the 4 archangel seals of the planets to represent the elemental angels, all that stuff. It didn't make any sense. And I didn't have any seals for the planets. So for years and years, I had that problem. And just this week, it turned out that, so Jason Miller tried to tell me, and I didn't listen about 10 years ago, that these elemental seals come from the clavis inferni, and it represents the 4 elements. And I was like, whatever. But apparently they've been there this whole time. There's a traditional resource that goes back to the whatever century that has seals for the 4 elemental kings, and that's basically all you need to use to put together a lawman for these spirits. I think I have a blank lawman in there too somewhere, but there's a blank lawman for sure in the workbook. But you can put together a lawman for the Trithemian arts using this seal. I would also use the names that go along with these: Maimon, Edgin, Payman, and Euricus is the one instead of Orions. I don't know why it's Euricus, but I would use Euricus since that's the name of the seal. But if you want to put together a way to perform an initiation into the elemental kingdoms using a Trithemian method of conjure and the Laman, you can use this seal and that name of the elemental kings, and you can actually finish the elemental initiations using the same method that I recommend for the seven spheres. Instead of an Orphic hymn, you would just use a poem to each of the elemental kings. You could use the elemental prayers from Eliphas LeVay, or you can create your own elemental prayers from the heart. So the planetary angels, this represents again the things that you would put around the 10 the spheres around the magical circle here, around the outside of that. Here it is in Hebrew. This is in the celestial script. Here they are in English. I would definitely use English today. I wouldn't bother with any of this Hebrew. I think the English is sufficient. Here we can see the angels in their spheres. This shows the geocentric realm of creation. This shows the four elements. There's the earth, air, and water are combined in the center. The seven planetary spheres, and then the spheres leading up to the prime mover. This one actually has an extra one here in between the zodiac and the heavens of the zodiac, the fixed stars in the heavens of the zodiac. And I'm not sure what that difference is, but it's something I just noticed the other day. This section, the talisman spirits. So if you look at the Key of Solomon, there's a piece where it talks about the seven planets, and you can make these talismans. They have a different number of talismans for each of the planets, and they do these wonderful, miraculous things. But within each of those lists, there's one talisman that has four spirits on it, and there's four spirits for each planet. So I got to thinking one day that maybe they were the elemental reflections of the planetary spirits. And I started treating them as if they were, and I found it to be super effective. So this table shows the four elements, or the four elemental aspects of the seven planetary systems, or seven planetary spirits. So for Saturn, it's Ameliel, Anakiel, Arakia, and Anazakia, right? So those are the four spirits that are related to Saturn, and they will cause in the material realm the accomplishment of all the things that you want done in the spiritual realm. So like you would conjure Camiel, Cassiel of Saturn, and Ameliel, Anakiel, Rukia, and Anazakia, or Tafkiel, and these guys to accomplish your will of Saturn on the earth. Here's the seal that you would use for your talisman, for your laman to call in the spirit, and each of the names of the spirits. And so that's in there if you want that. And then that's it. So I hope you had a good time. That's all I have for the class. It ended up being almost 3 hours. Holy shit. Thank you all for sticking around, those who stuck around. I can't believe that you managed to do that. I will stop recording here. Does anybody have any further questions? We can all go off of mic, or actually I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, and we can record messages somewhere else.